Tonight, Guy Gardner gets given a blue ring because they finally realized he's much more of a winter than a fall. Catwoman is written by anybody besides Ann Nocenti, which makes it the must-buy comic of the week. And it may have taken 160 weeks, but DC has finally admitted they need to bring back pre-Flashpoint continuity. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 160 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host and it is the final week of Future's End month. Oh boy. I was kind of amazed that this month has been as good as it has been. Up to this point, there has been a bunch of bad comics, but there also has been surprisingly many very good ones. So the fact that this month is managing to leave off on a decent note in my mind is very surprising. And I don't want to spoil too much of what that means for this week's episode, but it's not bad. It's not all bad, at the very least. So real quick, I'll just give the rundown on what's coming out, and there's a few other things you need to know as well. So we have, in no particular order here, the Future's End month tie-in things for Catwoman, Harley Quinn, Superman, Red Lanterns, Sinestro, Aquaman and the Others, The Flash, G.I. Zombie, Justice League Dark, and the one that didn't have a series pre-existing with it, and yet somehow the most important book that came out this week, Booster Gold Future's End #1. That's a thing. Be sure to check that one out. It will be at the very end of the show because it is definitely the capper. In addition to those books that came out, we got 3 other ones. Our 2 weeklies, of course, of Batman Eternal and Future's End. Those both are coming out this week. But we also have something that I don't think anyone expected to see here. The capper to the Superman Doomed storyline, which is Superman Doomed #2. What's funny about that one is Superman Doomed #1 very clearly says one shot on it, and then this just sneakily puts a #2 there and hopes you don't notice it. They're just like, yeah, it's the second one, whatever, don't worry about it. Stop thinking about it so hard. That is, like I said, is the capper to the Superman Doom story. It wraps all of it up. If you haven't been following that, I don't blame you. But shockingly enough, if Booster Gold is the most important book this week, Superman Doomed is a close second. It's equally setting up all of the same things. And I don't understand how, but by God, they're trying. So yeah, a lot of stuff coming out. In terms of anything else you should know about this stuff, nothing really. The Flash Future's End tie-in is a direct continuation and is part of the story that is going on in Flash. So if you haven't been listening to the Flash stuff, I will do my best to bring you up to speed. Pun intended, but ultimately it is part of the run, so you might be missing a little bit of context there. Beyond that, nothing else really needs saying. I am filming this very, very late at night, and I would like to wrap up sometime before the sun rises. So I'm just going to call this intro there, and we're going to get into... God, where do I want to start? Let's start with Superman Doomed. Let's wrap up the big event. Superman Doomed #2, written by Greg Pak and Charles Soule, art by just a lot of people. I'll go quick. Ken Lashley, Simon Kudransky, Corey Smith, Dave Bullock, Jack Herbert, Ian Churchill, Aaron Cooter, Vicente Cifuentes, and Norm Rapman. So, last time was technically Supergirl, which is an absolute nothing in terms of this book. The other last time is Superman. He gave himself over to Doomsday, and then Doomsday started charging at Brainiac's ship. So we pick up in Smallville, basically getting a recap for anybody who wasn't tuning into every book. Everyone on Earth is being absorbed into the Brainiac consciousness, and Batman's like, yep, first it's Smallville Metropolis, then the rest of the world. So Lana's there, and she's freaking out because her parents are part of that. She talks to Martian Manhunter being like, yo, where's Superman? And he's like, oh, he's going up to the ship to fight, but he's like all Doomsday now, so that's a problem. Lois, who still has her telepathy powers, reaches out, tries to connect, and she's just like, yeah, no, he's just a vortex of rage. I don't even know what's going on up there. And Batman's like, okay, well, we've got a map of the mothership. John, could you upload that to his brain? Can you show him exactly where he needs to get to in the ship? And he's like, I mean, I can, but like, I don't know if anybody's piloting the body. It's just Doomsday right now. And so Lana and Lois are like, no. He can do it. I believe in him. Also, Lois, telepathically connect us into Clark's brain so that way we can talk to him. So they do that. They try to reach into Clark's part of the brain, and Lois is basically like, hey, I got Lana here, but like, I need you to know you're fighting for all of us down here on Earth. Your cousin's here, Crypto, and the little monster dude from Superman. Like, all these things are down here, 7 billion people, and you'll do whatever it takes to save them. But you need to come back to us, Clark. Remember, you're not Doomsday. You're still a human underneath all. And Lana's like, okay, Lois, cut the brakes a little bit here. Hey, Clark, it's got my parents. Get up there and kill that frickin' Brainiac thing, all right? So we then cut into Superman's mind, and as he's literally just pushing through the mothership, he's just punching his way through it. And we see he is approached in his psyche, like Clark is, by Perry White, who is definitely been absorbed by Brainiac. And he's like, oh, hey, Clark. Oh, geez, I thought you were a goner. Look, you can stop Doomsday, right? Because if it manages to get into the heart of Brainiac's ship, like, all of us captured souls are going to die. It's game over. You got to stop Doomsday. And Clark's like, why would Brainiac just let random-ass souls be traveling free? That doesn't make any sense. And then Perry turns into Brainiac, and he's like, all right, you got me. I'm Brainiac. Hi, how's it going? But, like, seriously, though, if Doomsday kills me, all those people's souls are also going to die. So you really should, not do that. And he's like, well, if I let you keep the souls, you're going to kill them anyway. And he's like, no. That's not my plan at all. Look, I have a very specific philosophy about the world, and here is what it is. If you want something to exist, you need something to perceive it. If you get enough people to perceive something in a different way, that will fundamentally change the universe to reflect that way. I have collected enough minds, almost, that I can change the universe into whatever I see fit. And that's my plan here. And he's like, that's stupid. That's not how things work. And he's like, really? You want to bet? Maybe I can make something come true for you. And he peers into Clark's mind a little bit, and Clark's like, stop it, get out of here. And he's like, no, just let me prove this. Let me just show you how this works. So he reaches in and he pulls out the memories of Lana Lang and also Steel, because why not? And he shows like, look, I've made a metropolis that is guarded by Lana and Steel, and Lana's also made of steel now, and like, it's the most wonderful city of all time, and it doesn't need you anymore, and it's utterly protected. Everything is safe, and they're also romantically entangled, so that's great for them as well. And then he's like, okay, but like, if you kill me, all of this is going to go away. And Clark points out, no, you didn't make it. It's not real. Therefore, it's not taking it away. And he's like, are you sure about that? Are you sure I didn't make it happen? I mean, I could make it happen. And Clark points out, Lana told me to kill you. And she's like, all right, well, or Brainiac's like, all right, well, I'll take that as a no, I guess, whatever. But like, you have given me some information on Lana and Steel's brains, so thanks for that. And then we cut back down to the fortress where Lana and Steel are now being soul-sucked into the Brainiac ship. And Batman's like, dude, Martian Manhunter, what is going on here? I thought you said that the fortress was safe. And he's like, it still is to some extent, but like, he was able to get into their minds because Superman knows about them. I guess he knew the back door to their brains. And the Martian Manhunter senses something else is going to happen, and all of a sudden, Cyborg Superman busts in through the ceiling. And Batman's like, oh god, I really do not have time to deal with this. So he calls up to Clark through Lois saying like, look, don't listen to Brainiac, just get in there, follow the map, find his body, and beat the crap out of him. So Batman starts going up against Cyborg Superman, and he's just throwing like smoke grenades, and Cyborg's like, bro, I literally have flown through like exploding stars. This is nothing to me. And then all of a sudden, Supergirl comes in and just blasts him with heat vision and like decks him and just like, all right, how about this? So they start fighting each other. Cyborg Superman's like, hey, Brainiac will help us bring back Krypton. You're a Kryptonian. Fight with me. Help me kill these worms and everything will be fine. And she's like, shut up, man. So we then cut over back into Clark's brain, and Brainiac's like, wow, okay, your cousin's pretty strong. And since you already laid a beat down on Cyborg Superman, she might actually defeat him. And he's like, yeah, you're scared, aren't you? And he's like, oh, I mean, you should be too, because let's follow this to its natural conclusion here. And so he once again peers into Clark's mind, and he's like, first off, she's going to kill Cyborg Superman. She's going to punch him to death. And Cyborg Superman is her biological father. And Superman's like, well, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, oh, did I not mention that? Yes. She'll kill her father. And she will be so super upset by that when she finds out, but she's not even going to have time to do that because she's going to realize that you, being stuck in doomsday mode, are a threat that needs to be dealt with. She's going to fly up here to the ship after you kill me. Then she's going to tear you in half because you will be weak enough at that point to be murdered. And then she'll absorb the doomsday virus and she'll become the next doomsday. And all that's going to happen because you are still coming after me and trying to kill me. And Clark's like, all of that rests on the presupposition that she kills Cyborg Superman. And while she may be a little bit rage-filled recently, she ain't gonna do that. And we see back down on her, she's beating up Cyborg Superman, but she's just taken him down. She hasn't actually killed him. So we then have Lois looking into Cyborg Superman's mind, and she's like, there's a lot of crazy stuff in here. I don't know how long it's gonna... I'm making my way in, but I don't know how long it's gonna take. So Brainiac's just like, well, that's annoying. All right, fine, whatever. But you have now given me entrance into Supergirl's mind the same way we did with Lana. And he's like, God damn, stop doing that. And he's like, oh no, I'm just going to get... Look, hey, how about this? What if I offer you another fantastic reality of things going super great? And how about one involving Batman? And so we then cut to a Gotham City where Batman's been retired for 25 years. And they've made a Batman museum. And Superman's coming to like the inaugural thing of it. And Batman's like, Superman... You told me that like only 10% of people only needed to like see your way of things, to have the optimism you have, and that would ripple throughout society and like everything would be made better. And because of you, Gotham's a safe place. I owe everything to you, Superman. And Superman's like, well, I hope you're okay repeating that once Diana shows up. And Bruce is like, what the hell's a Diana? And then back in Clark's mindscape, he's like, see, you almost got me there. That one seemed pretty real there, but it wasn't, because you don't know what Diana is. And Brainiac's like, all right, whatever, I got Batman now too. Seriously, you're out of people. I am managing to capture them all. And he's like, nah, because if you don't know who Diana is, that means that you don't know where Wonder Woman is. And therefore, she's coming after your ass. So we cut to the Phantom Zone where Diana was, and she manages to use Warworld, or use Mongol to use Warworld to fire a giant laser beam out of the Phantom Zone directly into the mothership. And Brainiac's like, okay, that's powerful enough, it's gonna kill you too, bro. And he's like, no, it's just enough to break your defenses so I can get in here and punch you to smithereens. And we see Doomsday is in fact in front of the Brainiac's body, and Brainiac's just like, you can't be my reality. I've got everything I need here. He's like, want to bet? So he rips Brainiac out apart from his ship. And then Lois and Martian Manhunter both feel it, the telepathic like reverberations of it. And she's like, wait a minute, Brainiac's vulnerable. And I have Brainiac powers. I'm gonna go tap into that. So she goes up and she breaks into the mindscape along with Clark and Brainiac. And Clark's like, hey, Lois, I want you to meet someone. This is Brill Dox. He's Brainiac. And she's like, oh, man, this dude sucks. He's literally the worst dude ever, and I've only barely tapped into his mind. I'm going to kill him right now. And Clark's like, hold on. I just want you to see, like, take a look deeper into his brain. And we see Brainiac's history. He was a scientist. He had a wife and a son. He did some experiments on the son that messed up somehow. His wife was so pissed off at him, and he was like, oh, I was trying to save the world, don't you understand? But I failed. And so he bottled that up, and he is trying to get the power to reawaken them again. And we see his little reality warping power thing that he's trying to do is just to get his son and wife back. And Superman's like, see? That's all he wants. He just wants to make a universe where his family is able to live again. And Lois is like, I'm sorry. He's trying to kill the entire planet Earth in order to make that happen. Do you think that's really a fair trade? And he's like, no, it's not fair. It's absolutely not. But, like, do we want to punish him? or do we want peace? And Brainiac is like looking at the little reality warping thing in his hand, and then he's like, all right, well, Daddy's got to go to work now. And he lunges after Lois, starts draining her of all the remaining Brainiac ability, and she's like, whoa, hold on, because you're not keeping that reality warping thing, like they're fading away. And he's like, I don't care, they were never really alive, I'll just make them again, doesn't matter. So Superman's like, oh, okay, I may have misjudged this one. So he jumps in and he's trying to save Lois, and Lois is like, Clark, it's too late, he's gonna get everything, but like, are you willing to do what has to be done? And Clark says yes, and she's like, good enough for me. And she takes all of the remaining Brainiac energy and uploads it into Superman Doomsday's body, and Brainiac's like, oh god, that's not good. So now Doomsday has all the powers of Brainiac as well, and he's like, all right, you've done enough to this universe, now it's my turn. And he takes the entirety of the mothership and like throws it into the wormhole that it came out of, like into a black hole or something. And he has this little moralistic message at the end of like, yeah, I killed Doomsday and I'm gonna have to live with that for the rest of my life, but like, I'm not gonna be angry about it, I'm just gonna do better. That's live and learn. So we see Lois is now successfully de-Brainiaced. Everyone on Earth starts waking up because he had all the souls inside of him and he's like sent them all away. Wonder Woman somehow gets out of the Phantom Zone, and we see Superman just holding Brainiac at like the edge of a black hole, and he's like, bro, it's gonna pull both of us in. And he's like, whatever, I'm just here to save this planet, that's all I'm doing. So it looks like it sucks both of them in. Earth has survived, the mothership's disappeared, and then something happens where Brainiac gets like melded through time and space. We get a thing that says asset acquired, mission status failure, collection in process. It looks like he is reabsorbed into something, but then all of a sudden we see Brainiac sitting around fractured pieces of time and just like things that never were, like the Earth 10 Plastic Man and the Nazis. We see Legion of Superheroes. We see the post-crisis Teen Titans team. Like, all of this stuff that never was. And Brainiac's just like, what the hell is this? And that's the issue. I don't have to spoil this because it's very clear. Convergence? Maybe? Timeline fracturing? It's a whole thing. What the hell was this event, man? All right, to be fair, there is an aftermath issue. I think it's over in Superman Wonder Woman, so it's not totally done yet, but like, what the hell was this all doing? What were we leading to? What was the point of all of this? And the answer is, I don't know. It seemed to be a thing of, yes, Superman might kill occasionally, but like, it's kind of, you know what it is? It's disproving Batman's thing. Where like Batman's like, oh, if I kill the Joker, if I go down that path, I'll never turn back. Superman's like, nah, you could pretty easily turn back, bro. That's super okay to do. So yeah, I don't know. It was a weird little event here. And I say little, it's been going on for months. I mean, I guess this particular one, I give it like 7.5. It's artistically well told. It does a few little things of like, oh, look at this like fantasy world and how cool it would be. And like, it's a nice little what if story, but ultimately, as the concluding chapter of the event, it literally all boiled down to, and then Superman punched him so hard he went into a black hole, and then he's gone. And we don't even find out what happens to Superman. But considering that it says to be continued next time in, let me just double check here, Action Comics number 35, I'm thinking he's fine. So yeah, it's a lot, but I'll give it a 7.5. The art's good, the writing's fine. It's just, collectively, as a whole event, it was a weird one. Batman Eternal number 25, written by Snyder, Tynion, Fawkes, Higgins, and Seeley. Art by R.M. Guera. Okay, so we open up at the Gotham Gazette. If you remember last time, Jason Bard was basically saying, hey, I need martial law enacted. I need to be able to do that stuff. but he was denied. So he goes to the Gotham Gazette, he talks to Vicky and says, hey, there's a conspiracy going on, a bunch of crazy stuff's happening. I need you to run this specific article in order to allow me to do what I need to do. And Vicky's like, that seems really bad. You're just trying to use this piece of fake news to convince a elected official to do something. And Bard's like, yes, that is exactly what I'm trying to do, but to save lives. So let's focus on that. And she's like, all right. So she runs an article that basically says terrorist attacks have been threatened against Gotham. They'll happen any day now. And we see it very quickly has an effect of everyone in the city is freaking out. And we get a young girl who is traveling with a jug of water down a dark alley. And she's immediately jumped by two guys who are like, hey, we're going to need that water for when the attacks come. So you better let it go. And she's like, but my mother's sick. And it's like, well, too bad. So they're about to jump this girl when all of a sudden they are struck by tasers. And we see Harper Row is there, and she's like, oh, just your friendly neighborhood taser girl. And Red Robin, who's watching nearby, is like, seriously, taser girl? That's a name you could come up with? And she's like, it's a work in progress. I'm figuring this out. And he's like, okay, but I also have been teaching you how to fight, like, physically. You don't need tasers anymore. And as he approaches her, she, like, flips him over her shoulders, being like, yeah, I know I can fight now, but I like having my toys. And he's like, oh yeah, no, I get it. So then he like taps a button on his glove, and then all of a sudden his, I don't know what you want to call it, cross harness across his chest leaps off of his body and like binds her up. And he's like, so you were saying? So at that point he gets a call from Jason saying, hey, Tim, something's happened, get over here. So we go back to Wayne Manor, where Julia is just walking through the Batcave, just being like, what kind of 13-year-old boy fantasy is this, that you have a giant-ass sculpture of a dinosaur just smack dab in the middle? Like, seriously? And Batman's like, I'm going to need you to focus here. We got a lot of stuff going on, if you haven't noticed. And she's like, oh, yeah, I've noticed. Like, there's stuff, like, all over the place. You got 13 riots across the city. Like, there's all these other districts and stuff like that. I mean, hey, you should see what's going on right around the Beacon right now. Wayne Industries stuff, it's absolutely being ripped apart. And Batman's like, well, I would absolutely love to see it if you would patch it in through the car. And she's like, oh, right, the car. Not like you have 25 of those, each with their own stupid little names. I don't know what car you're talking about, but here, fine, whatever. I'll patch in the video that we got of who let the architect out from Arkham. And she presses a button, and Batman's like, it's going through my cowl, that's not going through the car. And she's like, whatever, can you see it? And he's like, yeah. And then all of a sudden he sees Jason Bard's face, and he's just like, oh god, all right, fine, do you know where the commissioner is right now? And she's like, yeah, it looks like he's at home. And he's like, great, awesome, I'm gonna go visit. So we go to Gotham Mercy Hospital. Jason Todd is in Alfred's hospital room as Tim comes in, and he's like, geez, hey, it took you long enough. And Tim's like, what happened? What why is Alfred like this? And it's like fear toxin straight to the brain. Whenever they wake him up, he just screams. So we're keeping him in a coma. And Tim's like, all right, first Gordon, now Alfred, this is getting more and more personal. And he turns to Jason. He's like, look, we collectively as a Bat family have not been able to work together ever since Death of the Family. We need to put that aside. All right, we need to be fighting this together. And he tells Jason, like, have you looped in Barbara? And Jason's like, I was hoping maybe you could loop her in, because we had a whole thing happen over in Brazil. And Tim's like, oh my god, were you hitting on Barbara? And he's like, no, shut up, fine, I'll tell her, whatever. Oh, by the way, I broke into your base while you were gone, and I saw you've been hanging out with some blue-haired chick. She's pretty cute. And Tim's like, you did not break into my base. And Jason's like, yeah, all right, tell yourself that. So Tim makes the point of saying, like, we really shouldn't be doing this right now. Like, we're just talking about girls. It's not a good thing for us to do. And Jason's like, what are you talking about? This is literally all Alfred has ever wanted us to do. This is exactly what we need to do. So we have Tim hop over the line and ask if Harper knows where Batman is right now, because all of them need to get together. And Harper's like, of course I know where Batman is. So we go to Midtown, which is where Bard's apartment is. Batman just breaks in through the ceiling and just being like, I know you're here, man. We got to talk. We got some problems right now. I know who you're working for. And then Hush just walks in through the door being like, hey, man, I thought you'd be sooner. I've been waiting here forever. So Batman throws some batarangs like straight at his face. Turns out it's a hologram. And he's like, oh, seriously, you couldn't even tell it's a hologram? All right, look, yeah, you haven't even gotten started with how much I'm going to rip your life apart. This isn't even close to the end. So we cut over to Batgirl's apartment. She's on the phone with her dad, who's of course still in jail, and she's like, "Hey, I thought the commissioner was going to come and like talk to you with some new evidence he got about things." And Gordon's like, what? What are you talking about?" I was like, Did Bard visit you?" And he's like, "No, he came here the other night, but he didn't come for me. Like, I don't have anything to do with this." And Barbara's like, "Okay, hey, I gotta make some calls. I'm gonna call you back. Bye." And so hangs up on the dad. Immediately, her phone rings. She saw that she had like 14 missed calls from Jason Todd. So as soon as it rings this time, she picks up being like, "Hey, Jason, I thought my dad was going to get out of jail once we got that information to the commissioner. What the hell's going on?" And Tim is on the other side being like, "It's not Jason, but hey, we gotta go chat with the big boss, if you know what I mean." So Batman's still talking to Hush, the hologram, and Hush is just like, "Okay, look, you've had your time with Gotham. You've done everything that's worked for you. I'm here to take it all away. I just hate you that much. I'm just going to keep on doing that. I took a picture of you breaking into Jason Bard's apartment. That's going to go great on the Gazette tomorrow because clearly you're going extra legal here." And Batman's like, "I'm going to get you, man. Tommy, I know you, and I'm going to get you." And Hush is just like, "You didn't even know it was me until I had already won." So, yeah, right now, I'm not trying to kill you. I'm going to break a few bones and stuff, but, like, we're going to meet again. And he presses a button, and the entire apartment of Jason Bard explodes. So Penny, too, Julia is freaking out because she gets the explosion, but she's not able to get any of Batman's vitals. And all of a sudden, she hears the phone, like the line come up of Red Robin calling in saying, "Hey, we saw the explosion, family is on the way." And Julia's like, "What? Hold on, there's a family now?" So we cut over to City Hall. The mayor's freaking out because Jason Bard's apartment just exploded with him seemingly in it. But Jason Bard comes in through the door being like, "Actually, I got out at the last minute, but I swear to God, if you don't give me martial law ability right freaking now, we're going to have major problems because they're coming after you next, guaranteed." And mayor's like, "Fair enough. Call the governor. We're going to declare martial law in Gotham tonight." So last page is Batman crawling out of the rubble saying, "Hey, Julia, could you send the car my location? I'm not doing so hot." And then a speech bubble comes out from Tim saying, "Penny too, clever." Anyway, belay that, we're here. So we see Batgirl, Red Robin, and Red Hood are all there to help out Batman now and figure out whatever the hell is going on. I'm glad that the plots are reconverging. I'm glad we're focusing here. We got it all nailed down on Hush. Mind you, we are literally only halfway through the series here, so I highly doubt that this is the last time we're going to split up into multiple plots, but hey, at least we're doing something and we're causing some big motions here. I am curious to see how we're going to come back from martial law being declared, like all this crazy stuff going on down in Gotham, and we still got like 6 months to go. So we got our work cut out for us. Overall, I'm going to give this one I want to give it a 7. It feels like a 7 to me. The art is just a little bit for me. It's just not quite my style. There are some weird faces here, but I don't think it's bad enough to drag it down half a point. So I will just give it the flat 7 and call it a day. Future's End number 21, written by Azzarello, Lemire, Jurgens, and Giffen, art by Cully, Hamner. So we are on Green Arrow Island, and Green Arrow is welcoming Barda along with whoever else she came with and saying, "Hey, Barda, welcome to the army. We're going to go do some crazy stuff." And Barda's immediately like, "Hold up, Green Arrow and Red Arrow, I thought you guys were dead. What in the hell is going on here?" And I thought, Red Arrow specifically, I thought you died with all the other superheroes that came over from our Earth, because I completely forgot that there is a Red Arrow on Earth too. And he's like, "Yeah, okay, it's a long story, so I don't know where to begin." And Green Arrow's like, "Well, how about you go ahead and tell it from the beginning?" That's right, everyone. This is the backstory issue. You want to know what happened to the war between Earth 1 and 2 and Darkseid and all that? This is it. This is the whole story. So he just steps forward and starts talking to Barda, being like, all right, as you know, Apocalypse invaded our Earth, Earth 2. Happened so quick, we didn't even really have a chance, but regardless, we had to act quickly. We made a bunch of ships, and we bailed off the Earth. And there were a bunch of ships, but the lead one, the one up front, was filled up with most of the heroes that came through. Green Lantern, Flash, they all stayed behind to fight parademons, but the front one had things like Power Girl and Mr. Miracle and Aquawoman, all the big ones. Michael Holt, aka Mr. Terrific, had intercepted a beacon from across dimensions to say, like, hey, here's a safe place, come on through. And so they now had a new Earth to go to, and they were like, perfect, awesome, let's go. Red Arrow, as he's walking the halls, he sees Barda is on one of these secondary ships, and she's blending into the crowd, and he's like, that's weird, but I'm going to let her do her thing. So they come out. They managed to appear in the Earth Zero universe, and we see that the Brother Eye satellite is watching them as they come in through the portals. But as soon as they do, they are immediately followed by a boom tube and all of Darkseid's forces. So the lead ship with all the heroes in it, they're like, okay, we got to buy them some time. We got to let them get down into the planet. Maybe then, like, the people down there could help us. So he immediately calls over to Red Arrow, says, hey, you're in charge of getting him down there. You do your thing. This is Mr. Miracle, by the way. And he's like, we're going to buy you some time. So they flip the ship around, and they are ready to do a suicide run. Power Girl comes out. They start busting through a few ships, but ultimately there's way too many of them. And Mr. Miracle is like, hey, if everyone here is cool with it, I know how we can buy some time. And they're like, okay, yeah, we get it. Let's do it. And so he presses the self-destruct button, and it manages to blow up many of the Apocalyptian ships. Red Arrow freaks out, but ultimately it did buy them enough time to get down to the planet. Mind you, it did not take out the entire fleet, so a bunch more of the ships arrive on the planet and immediately start attacking just all the people down there. But of course, this is Earth Zero. It has its own superhumans there, and they start fighting as well. During the fight, we see the Teen Titans get taken down by parademons one by one. As Red Robin's about to be killed, Red Arrow steps in and kills the parademon that was going to kill him. And Red Robin's like, Arsenal, is that you? And he's like, no, it's complicated. Bye. And he just leaves as Red Robin passes out. We see all around the world much the same story. People are joining in the fight. Normal people are coming in as well. Atlantis gets involved. All the stuff. Even Barda comes in, and she's like the lone warrior of Toronto who's just destroying everything. And it's just like, yep, all that's happening. And Barda interjects at this point, being like, bro, you are literally telling me the parts that I am there for. I don't need this part of the backstory. I want to know what the hell you're doing on this freaking island, man. And Red Arrow's like, I want to find Mr. Miracle. I'm wondering why you want to know about Scott so much as well. And he's like, that's none of your business. So Green Arrow steps in and it's just like, okay, maybe I should explain the middle bits. Maybe I should say exactly what we're doing on the island, because that does seem to be the part we should have opened with if we weren't telling the story to some other third party, right? So we see, they fight back the forces of Darkseid. Apocalyptic forces are gone, but ultimately there's still a huge amount of interplanet refugees. So a bunch of people are trying to set up, but they don't have any sort of papers or anything. So they form a thing called the GPA, the Global Peace Agency. And they are supposed to be the ones that meld together the two societies, but ultimately they come out with a thing called Earth Cards, which is just used to discriminate and form more hatred between the natives of Earth Zero and the refugees from Earth 2. So we basically get the Earth 2 people becoming pariahs. They're all viewed as like these evil things, and for months nobody likes them. Green Arrow sees how much problems this is causing, so he uses his pull as Seattle's #1 dude to make Seattle an Earth card free zone. And he's like, and ultimately, I want to do it for everywhere. But in looking into the GPA, trying to figure out like what are they doing, like what's going on, I ran into Red Arrow here, and he's my doppelganger from the other planet. And so we figured that like other heroes there had gone missing, but we figured out that the GPA might have had something to do with that. They might know what's going on. The reason they figured that out is because Deathstroke showed up, and Deathstroke was employed by the GPA. And so they tried to figure out, like, why would a normal-ass government agency be employing Deathstroke the Terminator? So they do some more looking into it, and they find two big clues. The first is there's a dude named Maxwell Payne who had apparently taken down Earth's defenses just days before the invasion fleet popped through. So that's suspicious. And then second thing is that the Brother Eye satellite that was watching, about 3 seconds before the self-destruct signal went off, it fired off a massive bit of energy. And they don't know exactly what happened there, but they are almost certain that it was a teleportation thing. And it teleported them into the Brother Eye satellite. Now, they thought, all the heroes inside thought, that this was a more apocalyptic stuff because it looks very, very similar for some reason. And so they just started wrecking the place. But ultimately, they were unable to do anything. So at this point, Barda jumps in and she's like, whoa, 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 whoa. They're alive? They're all alive? Where are they now? And he's like, well, that's kind of the hard part. See, a few weeks afterwards, a shuttle went up to the satellite, and on board was Deathstroke. And that's how we linked that together with the GPA and also Cadmus, because that's where the ship was from. So we figured out that the GPA, Deathstroke, and Cadmus are all tied together, and they now have your heroes. That's almost guaranteed. So Green Arrow, he faked his death. He did a whole thing in order to get out of the limelight. He flew some arrow jets to get some satellite imagery of what's going on this island that was owned by Cadmus, and he saw that they were doing experiments on Earth 2 heroes, and he specifically saw Mr. Miracle and Aquaman were there. And he's like, yep, I got 26 seconds of footage before they were shot down, but that's all I needed for the proof I have. So Oliver calls out his outsiders. He's like, this is my crew. We're going to go and take down the island, and I'm building an army to go do it. Barda, you in? And she's like, not only am I in, I'm going to wipe freaking Cadmus off the face of the earth for what they did. And yeah, that's the issue. There you go, the backstory. How exactly did it happen? Pretty much exactly the same as everyone was always saying. I like that we threw in this Maxwell Payne thing, because obviously that's going to come out to be something big. Whoever he is, whatever it is he plays in this, how did he know to take it down a few days beforehand? Who knows, but I'm sure we'll get there. Beyond that, it's a fine enough issue. I'm going to give it a 6.5, and I think I'm only below the 7 because they had to do that thing of well, I'm sure you're well aware of this, but let me explain to you the parts that you were there for, because they have to tell the audience that. But even the characters calling out okay, but I know all that, means that you should probably think of a better way to get that point across. Beyond that, it's a fine enough issue, gives the backstory perfectly well, and art is perfectly fine as well. So 6.5, we'll see what more comes out of it. Catwoman Future's End #1, written by Sholly, Fisch, art by Patrick Olliffe. So we start back actually in present day, where Catwoman is breaking into, I think, the Louvre. I'm not sure where it's kept, but regardless, she's stealing Starry Night. And she's like, oh, it used to be so easy back then. You just break in, sure, there might be an alarm or something like that, but ultimately, it just added to the rush. I miss those days. And we see what is going on 5 years later, where nothing is that simple anymore. And we see Catwoman is sitting at the head of a table of a bunch of different mob bosses. And there is Tusk, who is a dude with giant tusks and is kind of elephant looking, arguing with a mob boss whose brain is Georgie Maroney, whose brain was put into a cybernetically enhanced gorilla. And the caption box just says, it's a long story. And they're arguing with each other about a whole gang war breaking out. Apparently Tusk is breaking into the import business, which is specifically Georgie Maroney's territory. And Tusk is like, hey, business is business. If Georgie Bananas can't keep up, and Georgie pulls out a pistol and he's like, nobody calls me Georgie Bananas. And then Tusk pulls out a rifle and just everybody calls you Georgie Bananas. So then everybody at the table pulls out guns and starts aiming at each other. And Catwoman's just sitting at the head of the table. She slaps down her hands. Just oh, for the love of God. Hey, all right, look. All of you, get your testosterone back into your pants. We're going to figure this out right now. And Georgie's like, nah, man, this guy's got no respect for me. He's like, oh, yeah, why would anybody have respect for you? And Calvin's like, you guys are supposed to be professional leaders of crime families. Matty, how much did we make last quarter? And we are introduced to Matt Falcone, who is the second in command. And he's like, oh, 3.2 million. And he's like, all right, you're going to make more than that, Tusk, by selling some loose joints on the streets? You really think you are? We're going to work together here. We're going to figure this out. We've worked too hard to let it all fall apart because of this. And so she says that you can supply through Georgie's channels, but to make up for Georgie's losses, you're going to take Tusk's quarter or share for this quarter or something like that. And Penguin's like, yeah, that sounds fair to me. And Georgie's like, all right, yeah, works for me. And Tusk's like, no, that sucks. Nobody's taking my money. I'm not letting anyone do that, not even you. And he aims the gun over Catwoman. Catwoman pulls out her whip and pulls the gun out of his hand. And she points to the wall where Black Mask's skull is. And she's like, I thought you would know better. Do we not remember what I did to Black Mask? None of us are working out of this organization. Got it? That's not what happens. And she throws Black Mask's skull at Tusk, hits him in the head. And just like, this is what happens when you get too ambitious. And Tusk is so pissed off. He's just like, you keep on throwing these rules at us that we can't work outside the organization. We only take from those who afford it. We only kill those who deserve it. I'm sick of it. I'm not dealing with it anymore. I'm going to kill whoever I want, starting with you. And he charges after Catwoman. And Erin McKillen, who was introduced in the Batman and Robin book, she's the head of gun running. She just shoots Tusk in the head, and he's just bleeding out now on the table. And Catwoman's like, oh, for God's sakes, McKillen, what did you just do? And she's like, kill only those who deserve it. Did or did not Tusk deserve it? And Catwoman's like, fair enough, but still, you just opened up a whole can of worms here. She turns to one of Tusk's men and is like, hey, what's your name? And she's like, hey, Javier. And it's like, cool, Javier, you're now head of the Tusk family. Tell your guys that we'll figure something out about this, but like, get this mess out of here. So they carry out Tusk's body. Catwoman talks to the rest of the heads of the family, being like, all right, look, we're not going to have a gang war. We're going to sort all this out. You guys spread out the word that there isn't going to be a war and just leave me alone for a while. So they all go their separate ways. Catwoman picks up the Black Mask skull and just be like, Jesus, man, this is getting out of hand. And that's when Matt Falcone comes back in and be like, yeah, you're telling me. And she's like, I thought I told you to go. And he's like, you know, I'm not going to go anywhere. So Matt points out, like, hey, you're laying down too many rules on them. Like, they're firecrackers. They want to go off, you know? If you want to control them, you need to show your strength. You need to do something stronger. And she's like, what, you don't think I'm strong? And it's just like, no, that's not what I meant. But like, everyone here is just waiting for you to slip. The moment you do, then they are going to take your place. And Catwoman's like, okay, but like, they're not going to do that because none of them can hold this organization together. And Catwoman says, like, I've brought all this together. Like, I've gotten all the families back together. I keep us legitimate in the ways that we need to be legitimate so the cops stay off us. I work small enough so that the Bat family stays off of us. I do everything I need to do. And Matt's like, hey, I get it. I'm on your side. You are the only person who could have done this besides my Uncle Carmine from back in the day. But like, yeah, it's you got to understand that like Gotham got a bit overgrown with psychos there. And Catwoman's like, yeah, but everyone who was left over was still too set in their ways. They were still trying to use blackmail and violence and whatnot. We had to do this differently. We needed a lighter touch, you know, like a thief. And that's the way that she managed to like pull Penguin over from his old way of doing things into this new one. And then it turns out that Catwoman and Nick are also having an affair because, of course, they're... Is it Nick or Matt? I swear to God, I just read it. Matt. Anyway, her and Matt are having an affair. So at that point, she's like, and besides, none of them will come after me as long as I'm the only one who knows the offshore accounts for the organization. And Matt's like, oh, you're not the only one who knows. And she's like, right, but I trust you. So we then see Matt being like, okay, look, we need to keep the streets quiet for all of our sake, but you just killed like a major leader of a family. That's going to cause some problems here. So what we need to do is we need to get over to the Tusk organizations now, and we need to like lead by example. And she's like, all right, fair enough. Let's go remind him that I'm in charge. So Matt calls up for the car and has the driver ready. Catwoman's about to get in. He's like, whoa. You know the deal. We always got to start the car first, make sure there's no bomb in the ignition. She's like, oh, yeah, you're always looking out for me. So car turns on, no problems. She gets in, and he's like, his phone goes off, and he's like, oh, let me just take this real quick. I'll be back in a sec. And so he goes, tries to get some reception on his phone, and as he walks away from the car, he presses a button that says detonate, and Catwoman's car explodes. And he says, that one was for you, Uncle Carmine. So all the other heads of the family come rushing in. They're like, what the hell just happened? He's like, I just killed Catwoman and I'm taking her place. Anybody got any problems with that? And he's like, well, hold on. You what? Why would we let you take the place? And be like, because I was the one who was second in command. And also, I'm the only other person who knows the offshore accounts. Check it out. And he pulls up the offshore accounts on his phone and they're zeroed out. They got nothing in it. And he's like, and the gorilla guy's like, hey, man. We gonna have a problem here? And he's like, she set me up. She drained the accounts before. I don't know how she knew, but she knew. And he's like, so you just killed the only woman who knows where our money is, and you don't have the money? Sucks to be the leader today, doesn't it? And he's like, oh no, you don't understand. She ripped me off too. And it's like, no, we know that. And then they just open fire on him, just straight up killing him. So Penguin looks around, just be like, anybody else want to take over? And the gorilla guy's like, seems like we're having a gang war after all. Cut to 6 months later, the French Riviera. Catwoman, now wearing a blonde wig, is just basking in the sunlight, enjoying some vacation. And in walks the Riddler. And Catwoman immediately recognizes him, just being like, what are you doing here, Riddler? And he's like, oh, Riddler, after all these years, don't we get to talk as just friends? And he's like, fine, what do you want, Eddie? Just like, oh, well, can I just visit an old friend? And she's like, stop asking questions to my questions. What are you here for? And it's just like, oh, well, you set up quite the puzzle there, and I've been puzzling it over for years. Why would Catwoman, who's known for working alone, take over an entire crime family? That doesn't make any sense. But ultimately, you had to have known all of this was going to play out that way. You knew that the Falcones were going to try to get back in charge, so you put one of them as your second in command. You knew that he would be trying to kill you, so you just stayed one step ahead of him. And then the moment that he did try to kill you, you faked your death, took all the money, and it was the greatest heist you've ever pulled. You literally robbed all of the money from all of the gangs in Gotham. And she's like, yeah, and like, what's your point here? And he's like, well, there's just one thing that I don't understand. There's one last final thing that, like, I didn't know, and that's why. What set you down this path to begin with? And we see Catwoman, like, bloodied and beaten in an alley, and then also the little flash forward that we got over in Batman number 28 of what happens during Batman Eternal, where she's saying, oh, Catwoman died because Batman left her to die. And she's like, I have my reasons, but ultimately I couldn't rely on anybody but myself. So are you here to, like, try to shake me down, Eddie? Is that what you're here for? And he's like, no. I mean, I could definitely use an extra couple million if you got it. And she pulls out a gun and is like, ready to shoot him. And he's like, oh, look, there's no call for violence here. I'm not going to, like, we don't got to be rash here. And she's like, yeah, I know, because you're bluffing. Like, you know the big secret that Catwoman's still alive, and that's worth more to you secret than it would be letting it out. So you're never going to tell anybody. It's no fun when everyone knows the answer. And that's the issue. That's where it leaves off. It's all right. It's fine. I mean, it's taking the current trajectory of Catwoman as mob boss leader and just taking it to a natural conclusion of saying, like, yeah, but she's still a thief at her core, and she's going to keep on doing that. So in a alternate timeline that we're never going to actually reach, it's a fine enough ending. I wouldn't want it in actuality where she actually fakes her death in that way, but it works in this context. So I'll give it a 6.5. I am just happy that this is not... God, I'm already blanking on her name. Innocenti writing this. It's very nice to have somebody else on that. So, kudos. Harley Quinn Future's End #1, written by Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Chad Hardin. So, 5 years from now, Harley Quinn wants to go to the Bahamas. Instead of taking a plane, she decides to put herself into a box and is being shipped by Fright in order to save a few dollars. As she is on the plane, it goes through a lightning storm / multiple tornadoes, and she's just being bounced around. She's like, Jesus, what's going on up there? I have a bad feeling about this. A few hours pass, and she washes up onto a deserted island. There were a few pets in the back of the plane with her, so she meets up with the dog that's there, licks her face as she wakes back up, and she's like, oh my gosh, the plane is crashing onto the island, and I'm deserted, and I have to use my survival skills in order to survive. I hope I can find pizza. And so she looks for the beaver, Bernie the beaver, which she had with her inside the crate. He's gone. So she tells the dog, hey, go and find Bernie. And she throws a stick in order to, like, try to get it to run. And it just skips past the stick and starts running down the beach. And just like, all right, completely useless. Time for me to make a shelter. And as she picks up some stuff from along the beach that's fallen out of this airplane wreckage, she comes across a soccer ball. And she's like, oh, that's perfect. Something for me to talk to. I know. I'll name it Wilson. No, that's a bit too on the nose. I'll call it Bernie. That's to make it easy to remember. And so she draws a Bernie face on it. And it's just like, oh, well, Bernie, build me some shelter, will you? All right, this isn't going to work. And so she takes the Bernie ball and she starts walking up and down the beach, seeing like, okay, well, maybe this is one of those deals where there's like a hotel right around the corner. I'll just make sure that that's not the case. And as she is going up, she finds the skull of Bernie has managed to survive. And she's like, oh, hey, you actually did make it. Where's your body? And she's like, I don't know, probably in a shark right now. So she makes a makeshift necklace, threads it through Bernie's skull, and now just has him around his neck the whole time. So next morning she goes hunting through the island. She comes across an active volcano in the distance, and she sees people up in the hills. And she's like, all right, I see you all there. Come on out, throw your surprise party. And so they come out. They've all got spears pointed at her. And she's thinking about running, but then one of them comes out, and he's wearing like a mask in the shape of Joker. It's absolutely Joker. I don't understand how she doesn't see it. And he's like, oh, most awesome goddess, I am Booba, leader of my people. Let us take you to our village and praise your greatness. And she's like, oh, all right, I'm cool with that. So they get to the village. They start feeding her a feast and all that. And she's like, hey, I haven't had any entertainment for a while. Maybe you could get some of your finest warriors drenched in coconut oil to fight it out in front of me. And so they start doing a whole battle with each other. A dude dressed as Batman throws down some knives for them to fight with, and Harley's like, ooh, this just got very good. And as they fight, they say like, oh, you're not gonna, literally they have a thing of, you're not gonna beat me again, Frankie. And the other one's like, oh, I'm so sick of you complaining, Gerard, get good. So they fight for a little bit, and then ultimately they just gore each other. Like, they just absolutely kill each other. And Booba's like, oh, I'm so sorry that they have both departed our worlds. Anyway, we want to escort you to meet our God King as soon as the sun rises. And she's like, oh, okay, whatever. So they, once the sun rises, go down, and she's like, by the way, why do you think that I'm a goddess? Like, I am, but like, why did you think that? And it's like, oh, your skin matches that of our God King, named as Thajoka. And he mentioned someone like you, so this will hopefully cheer him up because he's been very upset recently. And we see this giant temple was built, and she's like, oh my god, it's amazing. Let's race you to the top. And so she runs up the stairs one flight at a time, and there's like 150 stairs, and she's just complaining about how long it takes. So eventually she starts getting carried up. Meanwhile, the person up top is told that the God Queen is arriving, and he's like, God Queen? What? Oh my god, could it actually be? And we see, as she gets to the top, we reveal that it is the Joker. And Harley's like, oh my god, it's you! And she runs in, plants a big kiss on his mouth, and then yells at him for saying like, oh, I thought you were dead, and punches him in the face, kicks him in the shin, and she's just like, oh no, I'm sorry, what did I do? I didn't mean it. So at that point, all the people are like, hey, do you need help, Great Lord Joker? And it's just like, no, I'm good, but bring on a feast, pronto. So they make a feast for Harley and Joker explains like, yeah, I faked my death, but I just laid low for a while. I decided to come to this island and see if I could just take it over, and I did, and it was great. And like, I kind of got bored after a while, so I came up with a game. And I had all of the different people on the island dress up basically as members of the Justice League, and I told them that their task was to try to capture me. And one by one, I just systematically killed them all. But the one that managed to capture me was Joker, or was the Batman one. And he's like, oh, I have you now, Thajoka. And he's like, oh, and what are you going to do now, you caped buffoon? And he's like, what would you wish for, my king? And Joker's like, and that just got real old real quick. So I thought I was just going to die of boredom here. But then ultimately you showed up. And yeah, that's where we're at now. And Booba's like, oh, my king and queen, I hope you're ready for your final meal. And Harley's like, I'm sorry, final meal? What are we talking about? And Joker says, oh, did I not mention? We're getting married tonight at the mouth of the giant volcano. And she's like, oh my God, no way. And we see a little sequence of her at sundown wearing this beautiful ornate dress, being dressed by a bunch of like woodland critters and monkeys and such. And then Joker comes in being like, oh, hey, I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding, but I just had to see you. And then the volcano explodes. The wreckage catches Harley on fire. It impales Joker. He's dead. And everyone around is just dying. So then Harley wakes up. Turns out it was just a food coma nightmare. And she instead has to wear the traditional garb, which is a coconut bra and a grass hula dress. And just like, oh, well, I'm glad nobody can see me here. So they bring Harley up to the mouth of the volcano. As they're going up, Bernie's like, hey, this isn't a good idea. Joker has consistently proven that he makes your life significantly worse. You shouldn't be trusting him. And she's like, this is the happiest day of my life. I won't have you ruining this. So she throws Bernie's skull into a alligator pit, and he's swallowed, quote unquote, alive. We see Harley and Joker getting married at the mouth of the volcano. It actually starts going through, and Boo was like, Mr. Joker, I need to tell you something. And he's like, not now. Yes, I do. So they get married, and they say in like the process, just like, oh, do you cherish her and promise to love her until we drop her into the mouth of the volcano? And Harley's like, I'm sorry, what was that bit about dropping me in the mouth of the volcano? And he's like, is that a metaphor for old age? And it's just like, no, once we're done with the ceremony, we're going to drop you into the mouth volcano. And it cuts over to Bernie in an alligator stomach being like, I told you this was stupid. So Joker explains like, yes, you see, ever since I arrived, the volcano is apparently getting a bit antsier, and the people are looking for me to answer that. So we need to be dropping someone of divine blood in order to quell the volcano. Surely you understand, Harley. It's for the best. And then Booba speaks up saying, actually, sir, because it's a full moon, you both have to go into the volcano. And so Joker's super pissed off about that. Harley's laughing at him. They start bickering with each other. And Joker's like, you really thought I was going to marry you? You don't think I don't know what you've been up to over the years? I saw you were even part of a dynamic duo at one point, you stupid do-gooder. She's like, don't call me that. And so they start fighting each other. She kicks him in the nuts. The fake Batman comes in. And just like, hey, this is the law of our people. You must obey it. We're both of you are going in. And then Joker and Harley simultaneously throw punches to knock the fake Batman into the volcano. And Joker's like, look, if we don't come to a truce, at least for now, we're both going in. So truce. And she's like, fine, I don't like it, but yeah, I still hate your guts. So they kiss each other because completely dysfunctional. And then all of a sudden, the volcano explodes, and it sends everybody flying, including Harley, and she happens to be blasted all the way out back to the beach where she first landed. And as she wakes up, she sees a bunch of dolphins. Bernie manages to make his way back because one of the alligators exploded and his stomach was like burnt open. So Harley picks him up, and she's just like, oh, I'm sorry, but like, did Joker make it? Like, is he still alive? And Bernie's like, what does it matter? You're gonna die on this island. And as Harley's accepting that, all of a sudden Aquaman comes out being like, well, miss, looks like you've been through quite a lot. Where are you previously from? And she's like, oh, the Isle of Coney. She's like, oh, New York, hop on with me. My dolphins will give you a lift home. And Harley's like, oh, all right, sounds great. So yeah, that's a hell of a ride. I mean, it didn't even need to be a Future's End book. Like, this is just an extra issue of Harley Quinn. This is essentially just a fantasy issue. I'm gonna say this is a 6. It just, I don't know. There was nothing that was drawing me into it. It wasn't a bad issue. It was exactly what Harley Quinn has been, but that's just it. It wasn't anything that was like, and this is Harley Quinn 5 years from now. No, this is just Harley Quinn eternally. This is what she always will be. This is exactly what she's doing. So, yeah. 6. Superman Future's End #1, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Lee Weeks. So, the only thing you need to know, and even then you don't need to know it, going into it, is that in the new Future's End continuity, Superman is Shazam. 5 years from now, Superman is now Shazam in disguise. So we open up in Metropolis. We get 2 party bros who come out, and they're just like, hey, baby, you want to start a party with us? And they're like, screw you. And it's like, hey, we won the death pool of Green Arrow dying, so we're rich. Come on, let's go. And then all of a sudden this dude comes up saying, like, that's not how you start a party. This is how you start a party. And he grabs hold of him and throws him in front of an oncoming train. And the train just, like, derails. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is great. So we cut to a different district where a giant building's on fire. It starts coming down. And the fire department's like, oh, no more water, or more water. Neighbors say that there's still people inside, and the firefighter's like, it's no use. There's no way we can do it until the cavalry arrives. And out comes Superman holding a family of 3, getting him out of the fire. And he sets them down. And they're like, oh, is that all of them, Superman? And he's like, yep, just let the building burn down. No need to do anything more. And then this guy comes up and it's just like, what are you trying to pull? I saw the story from Lois Lane. You're not the real Superman. And he's like, I'm sorry. Did you not see me just save a family of people? If you got someone to complain about, talk to someone who cares. And Superman just flies off. And everyone's like, yeah, what's up with him? Jesus. And also, where's the real Superman at? So then we cut to Lois, who has figured out where Billy Batson's apartment is. And he's just like, all right, this is... It's a tiny place, not where I would expect him to live, but you know what? He's not Superman. So let me figure out who this guy actually is and why he's pretending to be Superman. And so Billy opens the door and she's like, look, please don't slam the door in my face. And he's like, I'm thinking about it. And so she just pushes her way in anyway. And just like, look, I know you think I ruined your life, but there's got to be more to the story. Tell me about Billy Batson. Tell me about Shazam. Why are you pretending to be Superman? And he's like, I'm surprised it took you so long to come here. Like, I figured you would be itching for more. And she's like, oh, well, I had to let it all die down a little bit. And he's just like, you made me look like an idiot. He turns on the TV, and all the news stories are still talking about that, saying how, it's a lie and it was a masquerade and all this stuff was going on. And he's like, you just saw something you shouldn't have even seen, and you just couldn't resist the scoop, could you? And she's like, yeah, I saw the lightning change you, but like, it's news. That's something that, like, I have to report on. But either way, like, I just want to know why. Let me talk to you. Tell me why you don't want to be Shazam. You want to be Superman. Like, why do you think you owe the world to Superman? And he's like, I don't owe the world to Superman. I owe it to Superman himself. And he recounts during one of the last days of the war. Shazam is fighting side by side with Black Adam, and they're fighting against a bunch of parademons, and it's like, we were on the back foot, we were barely surviving, and I have the stamina of Atlas himself, and I was barely holding it together. Like, I am not doing great. And in those last moments, I took it for granted that Black Adam had my back, but he sold me out, and he let a parademon take a shot and shoot me into a wall. And it was only then that Black Adam took out the parademon, but then he came over to me and he's like, you stupid idiot. Only a trusting child would turn his back on someone like me, so you don't deserve this anymore. And he went to go kill me. He went to, like, absolutely strangle me. And in a blur, all of a sudden, Black Adam was taken out. And I looked up and saw it was Superman. Superman swooped in for that. And he's got the Phantom Zone projector in hand, and he's like, Black Adam, I do not have the patience or the ability to deal with you right now. You've proven that you're an enemy. I got to get rid of you. And he sent Black Adam to the Phantom Zone. And Superman turned over to Billy and it's just like, hey, he's not going to hurt anybody there. You need to go home and get some rest. And Shazam's like, there's so much at stake, though. We're needed in France. Well, you got to help me out there. And Superman's like, I can't. I have another mission, and it sucks. And Shazam's like, oh, let me help. I can make it suck less. And he's like, no. For your own sake, this is something I need to do alone. Just go do what you got to do. That's what he says. And Billy's like, who says? What's going on? But that was the last time he ever saw Superman. And after that, he completely disappeared. And anybody who knows what happens, not sharing, nobody knows what went on with Superman. And they're like, yeah, well, when everything was said and done, the League felt that the Superman S still needed to be worn, so they asked Shazam to step in, and Billy happily accepted because Superman saved his life. He was the only reason he was still alive. So Lois points out, like, you can't devote your entire life to a memory like that. When do you get to be you? And he's basically saying, like, yeah, well, you made me look like a dork. You made me look like an idiot here. And Lois is like, look, everyone deserves to be their own person. You shouldn't have to be pretending to be somebody you're not. And Billy points out, like, isn't that what secret identities are all about? Isn't that the whole thing? And Lois is like, well, I've never really understood that part of it either. Like, I'd say go out in the open about it. But then all of a sudden there's an explosion across town, and he's like, sorry, trouble, I gotta go. And he says Shazam, turns into a Superman outfit, and Lois is like, that's never not going to be impressive. So he flies off, and we see that the person at the beginning who was causing all the troubles is a guy named Ibak? I'm not sure. But apparently he's a Shazam villain. And he's like, oh, Shazam, I've been looking for you for years, ever since before the war. I'm here, and now I finally found you pretending to be Superman. It's time you and I finish this. It's time that you face my wrath once more. And he picks up a civilian and throws her at Shazam. Shazam catches her, and he's like, yeah, you're no Superman. And he's like, yeah, want to bet? So they collide with each other. Ibak's like, oh, you can think of me as all of these horrible people from history rolled into one. I'm willing to take you out. And Shazam's like, oh, you're a fool if you think you can beat me. And he's like, oh, this isn't for you. And he picks up a car and throws it at a whole group of people just trying to run away. Superman flies in, grabs it, Shazam does, and gets it before it hits anybody, but it ends up colliding him in with a train. And as he's pinned between the train and the car, Ibak comes up, sees some gasoline pouring out, lights a match, and says, like, well, someone should do something about this this gas. It is an environmental hazard and all. And he lights it up and causes Shazam to explode. And he's like, well, that was easier than I expected. And then all of a sudden, Shazam's like, I'll show you easy. So he flies out of the explosion, grabs hold of Ibak, and just starts flying him up straight into, like, the lower stratosphere. And he's like, yeah, I get it. You're cruel, you're strong, but you may even be invulnerable, but you can't fly, which means this won't kill you. And he flies him all the way up and then just lets him go. And so then Ibak just falls and falls and falls down to the ground until, like, sonic impact he hits. And he's out for the count. Lois has made it over there, and she sees everything that Shazam did and just be like, well, hey, you may not be Superman, but you wear the S well. I think if you want to keep wearing it, he'd be honored for you to be in it. And Shazam's like, you know, I've been thinking what you said. Sometimes I do have to be me. Like, this guy came here looking for Shazam. Maybe I can be both. And so he says Shazam again, and he transforms into his classic outfit and says, yeah, I'm going to make sure that Superman's never forgotten, but I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it as Shazam. So there are others who can pick up where Superman left off. And Lois says, finally, a story worth looking for. And to be continued in Future's End. I like it. I mean, it doesn't really have much of a real message there. I'm sure that it's going to play a lot more into Future's End, but it's a nice little side story there of just basically saying, yeah, Shazam was living a double life for years, and this is something that he's now coming to terms with. And it feels like it could have very easily have been a story that was explored in the main miniseries, but we get it out of the way here quick, and it makes it just something that you can now accept as we roll into the main series again. So all in all, decent issue. I'll give it a 7.5. Very well done. Art also looks great. So yeah, it's a nice little Shazam / Superman story. Red Lantern's Future's End #1, written by Charles Soule, art by Jim Calafiore. We open up with a giant snake with a red lantern ring on its tail that is just repeating the words 3 down, 3 million to go. And it keeps saying that over and over again until we meet up with Bleez, who we see in shadow at first, just saying like, yeah, we get it. Don't waste your time. And it shoots out some of the napalm at Bleez. And Bleez was just acting as the distraction there, as Guy Gardner, who has become a Blue Lantern Corps member, has come down. And Bleez is like, hey, don't waste your time fighting us, it's hopeless. And Guy's just like, I wouldn't say hopeless. And as the snake goes to attack Guy, he uses a Blue Lantern construct to grab hold of it, and then just starts whispering to it, just starts talking, just being like, hey, man, it's cool, don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden, the red lantern ring just pops off of his tail, and the snake is cured, no problem. And Guy takes the ring and passes it over to Bleez, and he's like, are you ready? And he's like, yeah, just give it to me. And the ring says seeking new host. It's about to fly off, but then Bleez puts it onto her bone wings, which are already covered with like dozens upon dozens of Red Lantern rings. And she starts freaking out. It's like a lot of pain for her. And Guy's like, hey, are you good? You can do it. You're tough. You're the toughest gal I ever met. You can do this. And she like pulls herself back together, and Guy's like, you good? And she's like, yeah, of course, toughest gal ever. And they share the line, no more Reds. Like, that's their back and forth. They keep on saying that over and over. So they fly over to Yzmalt, and Bleez is like, okay, I think I figured it out. The reason that you're able to do so much cool Blue Lantern stuff without a Green Lantern present, which is a prerequisite in order for you to do cool Blue Lantern stuff, is that you swallowed a microscopic Green Lantern who's been inside you all this time. And Guy's like, no, that's not it. I promise you I'll tell you the secret later. So they land on Yzmalt, and now Yzmalt has still the red power battery there and still the Blood Lake, but it also has a little thriving community nearby. And they bring the snake, and the snake is like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I was just so angry. Are you going to kill me? I think I might deserve that. And this little group comes up being like, hey, everyone on Yzmalt is in the same place you were before. We got possessed by a red ring, and then we did something we regretted. But, like, you are not beyond saving. You can be helped. We're here to help you. If you truly want to end your life, we offer that. That is totally a valid thing. But, like, we're here to just talk to us for now. And so Bleez and Guy go off. They're camping outside the town of everyone else. And they have finally reached the end point of their thing. There are only 2 Red Lanterns left in the entire universe, Bleez and someone else. And they explicitly say, yeah, he's beyond saving. We can't like do this thing here where we're going to bring him down and try to cure him of his stuff. Like, what the way this is, we've got a deal going on, and like that's the only way this is going to work out is if we honor the deal. And Guy's like, nope, absolutely, I get it, no problem. So Bleez is just like, I don't even get it, man. How do you do this? And he's just like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you've always got like a witty one-liner, and in this case he does. He's been saying them the whole time. But she's like, what? How do you do that? And he's like, well, what can I say? Hope springs eternal. And it seems like they realize that they might actually die going up against this final Red Lantern. So they just agree to have sex of just like, hey, you want to? I mean, we'll both be thinking about other people, but like at least we can get some joy out of it. And he's like, yeah, I can live with that. So then we see who is this last Red Lantern. Inside of a replica of a House of Parliament, or like maybe a palace, I don't know. Regardless, it's Rancor. It's Jack, the last Red Lantern. And we see 2 aliens are throwing themselves before him. And it's like, oh, and they took everything from us. And they're so mean. They're such bad people. And he's like, what do you want me to do about it? And they're just like, well, we were told that, you know, if somebody comes before the Great Red King, that he would exact justice upon them. That's what we wanted. We wanted retribution. We wanted justice. And he's like, justice? I don't do justice. I do revenge. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to summon this giant-ass dragon construct, and I'm going to send it out to your enemies. And I'm going to not only kill them, I'm going to scorch their entire planet so that none of them will ever think about being able to live again. Every moment of their lives, whatever few there may be, will be absolute misery and pain. And the aliens are like, that's not really what we wanted. We just kind of wanted someone to hold them accountable for their sins. And it's just like, I don't do that. I do revenge. Bye-bye. And so the dragon flies off to attack them. Before it can get far, though, Guy makes a giant blue construct of a sword and just been like, okay, he's able to make a construct that's able to just exist on its own right. Oh, by the way, he's got an entire, like, jacket that's made out of rings. So he's got just as many rings as Bleez does, if not more. But he's able to make a construct that's able to exist without him just controlling it. So he is uber powerful at this point. And Guy's like, all of the rings belong to either you or him. This is as powerful as we're ever going to get. We need to go do this. And Bleez is like, oh, but even with them, how can we? And Guy's like, hope. Remember? Hope. You know what? I'm going to tell you my secret right now. How I'm able to do all the cool blue stuff. This is it. And he pulls out a necklace which has all the different ring colors on it. It's got yellow, pink, blue, green, red. It's got all of them on there. And he's like, I went through all of them. I tried them all out. I wanted to see, like, I was even in the Star Sapphires for a while. That was weird. But regardless, the thing that made me realize that hope is the one that makes it work for me is that it's the one that I was able to feel through all of them. Like, it ran through all of the others. So at that point, Rancor just shows up being like, well, ain't that grand. Anyway, you killed my dragon. And he blasts Bleez and Guy with like full power. And he's like, I'm going to get revenge for that. So he makes like a firing squad out of his stuff. Guy and Bleez throw up some shields. And Guy's like, hey, you hate him, right? And she's like, yes, more than anything. It's like, great, use that. I'm going to need a distraction to get up close. So she manages to make some more constructs, take out his constructs. And Guy sneaks up behind Rancor. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to let you do it. You're not going to take away my rings. The universe needs reds. You were one of us. You know how bad it got. And he's like, look, I get it. I understand. But, like, you got to hear me out. And he's like, no. She messed everything up. She has to die for what she did. This is all her fault. And if you get in my way, then I'll kill you too. And Guy's like, you done? I'm not going to say anything. I've just got one thing to tell you. 20 words, max. And if you listen to that, whatever happens after that happens. And so he goes up next to Rancor and he just whispers some words. And Bleez is like, what the hell are you doing, man? Get him. Take him out. And then all of a sudden he holds up his hand and all of the red rings on Rancor just come off of his body. And they go over to Bleez and they start piling themselves onto her bone wings. And she's like, oh my God, yes, infinite cosmic power. And she starts firing over, trying to attack Rancor. Guy throws up a shield and just being like, whoa, hey, hold up now. And she's like, no, this was the deal. The deal was I kill him and then you kill me. And there are no more reds after that. You gotta let me kill him. There is no chance of redemption for him. And Guy's like, I got the rings off of him. I don't think that. Let me tell you what I told him. And she's like, no, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to make a difference. You owe me what you told me, like your deal was. And he's like, okay, I will do whatever you need to do. But like, you got to just hear me out. And he explains that when he first put on the ring, the reason that hope stuck with him so thoroughly is that he got a vision of the future. And that's what gives him hope, is that he's able to see past all of the crap. All of the current bad times. He can see how good the future is. That's what makes the blue rings give them hope. And in that future, he saw Bleez and Rancor happily living together. And they were both able to move past this. And Guy says, I don't know how it's going to happen, but you're going to find a way. No one has to die. And Bleez's anger just gives way. All of the red rings come off of her bony wings. She turns back into her, like, angel winged form, and Guy just disintegrates every last one of the red rings. And as Bleez and Rancor are hugging, Bleez and Jack, his name is, she's like, is it over? Is this really the end of it? And Guy just says, I don't know, but I can hope. And that's the end. I like it. I think this was a really solid one. As hokey as it is for a lot of reasons, it is also just such a nice little wrap up to everything. Is saying like, yeah, and in the end of the Red Lanterns, like, people can put that behind them. People can move past their rage. And the fact that Guy Gardner is the one facilitating that is great character development. I only wish this was not out of continuity, that this wasn't just a little flash into an alternate timeline. I would have loved to see this be the end game. Overall, I'm going to give this one an 8. I really enjoy it. I think it's very well done. My only little critique here is the middle bit when they're, talking about how powerful Rancor is and Guy saying, oh, we can do it, like, we just have to hope. It just felt like the fight scene immediately afterwards was a bit cut short. I would have either made it longer or not had it at all. But just because they only make like a single construct and then move on, it just felt a little bit weak for me. But that is a very minor nitpick for a very well told story. So, top marks. Sinestro, Future's End #1, written by Cullen, Bunn, art by Igor, Lima. So we pick up 5 years in the future on Tartaros, which is a super duper ultra max like prison planets. All of the cells are hovering over oceans made of acid. There's a bunch of robots that are only programmed to like murder if they are fought up against, and all of the prisoners are stripped of their identities and are just known as inmates. And we see Sinestro is one of the people here who has been cast off and sentenced in here to die and be forgotten. And as he's making his way through, we see he's like bullied by some of the warden robots and just like, oh, where are you supposed to be, inmate? Get there, or you'll be docked meals for a week. And we see that he like flexes his fist, and his middle finger on his left hand where he kept his ring is just completely gone. It has been cut off. And he's like, yeah, there's been one of these days I would have wanted to see this entire place burned to the ground. Like I would have done it myself, but those days are long since past. So we see that he gets to do one of his favorite, not activities, but, tasks that he has to do to keep the prison running, which is working in the factory. And the reason that he likes it is that he's able to build the very robot guards that are going to be like dictating against him. And he likes the feeling of building his own army up. And inside this prison as well is Nostromo, who is the wielder of the Indigo Light. He's the one who made the Indigo Tribe's rings. And we see he comes up to Sinestro, and Sinestro's working on one of the robots, and he pulls out a little device from one of their faces. And he's like, oh, do you need any assistance? And Sinestro's like, no, I'm fine. Bye. And he passes off the machine bit to Nostromo, and Nostromo whispers out like, no guarantees, but that might just be enough. And Sinestro's like, oh gosh. So we cut to sometime later. Sinestro is watching as a bunch of new inmates are brought to the prison, and they are brought here by the Apex League, which is just a bunch of people who go around as like bounty hunters, not even bounty hunters, just like police force of the universe alongside like the Green Lantern Corps. These are other people who stand up and go to enforce the rules of law and whatnot. And they don't mind being a little bit more forward with how they get things done. And despite the fact that he was, all the lanterns were kind of in accordance with each other, the Apex League was not going to stand for the Yellow Lantern League, or at least Sinestro. So we see on New Corrigar, the Apex League attacks. It's coming after the entire Yellow Lantern Corps. Yellow Lantern Corps fallen one by one. We see Arquillo die. We see a bunch of other people. At a certain point, Sinestro, Lysidrax, and Soranik, who has officially become a Yellow Lantern member and is calling Sinestro her father, says like, oh, we've lost so many members here, everything's too bad, you've got to let Parallax out of the Parallax pit. And he's like, no, I can't do that. It's the only thing that's keeping New Corrigar together. It would kill the planet if I free the entity. And she's like, okay, but the core, like we could find a new planet. And he's like, no. My people have struggled long enough to have a planet to call their own. I'm not going to let this one fall. The whole reason that this league is here is for me. I'm going to leave the planet, and I'm going to let them take me if that's what it needs to be. You stay here, and you are going to take my place. And she's like, don't say that. I know you'll be back. Just make it back in one piece. So he flies off. He decides to take Lysidrax with him. And Lysa's like, why me? Why not your daughter? And he's like, we've all got our place in time. She needs to stay with the Corps. So we cut back to modern day, and we see Lysa appears in Sinestro's cell as like a shadow, and she's like, hey, that thing you asked me to do, I did it. It was really, really hard. I want you to understand that, but I have done what you needed to do. And now for me, the story has ended. It is up to you to finish this tale. And he's like, yep, will do. So we see Sinestro and a bunch of other inmates are meeting up, talking about like escaping and whatnot. And all the other inmates are like, that's impossible. You never get past the sentries. And that's where Nostromo comes in, and he offers up a little prosthetic finger for Sinestro. He attaches it to his hand, and one of the inmates is like, what's that little trinket going to do? Who do you think you are? And then all of a sudden the yellow energy just beams through Sinestro. It is a makeshift fear ring, and he is going ham on all of the guards, just wiping through all of them. So he manages to get Nostromo and a few other inmates out onto a ship. They get on board. A bunch of other inmates try to come in with them, and Sinestro's like, nah, man, none of you guys are worth it. I only need what I need to get off this planet. So they get off the planet, and the rest of the inmates are super happy about it. And Sinestro says, hey, I know where we need to go. It's these coordinates here. And Nostromo's like, you sure, man? Because, like, that just looks like empty space. And Sinestro sees a vision of Lissa and just like, no, I'm positive. So they make their way to this empty space, and Sinestro's like, all right, I'm going to use the energy of the ring to get out there, but, like, I barely have enough of a charge left, so be ready to pull me back. So he goes out into space, and Lissa's out there, and she's like, hey, I'm not actually here right now. This is just me leaving a message for when you get here. Bye. And she fades away, and what's left in her place is a bunch of bones, but specifically her skull. And Sinestro picks up her skull, heads back to the ship, but he uses up the rest of his charge. So now he is essentially powerless, and one of the weaker members of who's left on the ship. So we see the ship land on New Corrigar. As the door opens, everyone on board is dead, including Nostromo. Sinestro is the only one left alive, and he's like, well, couldn't risk any of you guys messing this up. Bye. And he makes his way out onto New Corrigar, which is now more appropriately called Necropolis because everyone's dead. The entire Yellow Lantern Corps, including his daughter, are all dead. And we see that the Apex League has followed Sinestro here, and they're just waiting for him. And he's like, you know what happened here, right? That monster that you kept inside your planet, it got out and it killed all of them pretty much as soon as we left. So yeah, it's exactly what we were worried about, and that's why we couldn't let you live. And he's like, you freaking idiots, you weakened us. Your fight against us made it so that they could not handle Parallax alone without me being here. That's the whole reason this is all your fault. But you know what? More than that, it's my fault. It's my responsibility. It takes Lysidrax's skull and throws it to the ground, breaks it open. And inside is a black lantern ring. And he's like, but it doesn't matter because I'm still Sinestro. And we see him put on the black ring. He becomes a black lantern. And he's like, all can be bent to my desire. All can be bent to my will to spread fear. And I will build up my forces once more, and everyone shall know the new Sinestro Corps. And we see him raising up all of the old Yellow Lantern Corps members to attack the Apex League, now as undead zombies. Cool, man. Great. It's a fine enough issue. I think it's interesting enough to say, yeah, no, of course Sinestro's not going down without a fight, but I don't know. Black Lantern seems extreme. It's fine. I think the only thing that's weird to me about it is that over in the Green Lantern tie-in, the Future's End Green Lantern, that also had Black Lanterns in it, and they don't really interact. I mean, maybe there's a way that you could justify both of these coexisting, but I don't know. It seems like one or the other is the canon one. One of them has to not exist by default, but hey, I'm sure we can make any justifications we want here. Beyond that, it's a fine enough issue. Art's very good. It's just a little bit I don't quite have the attachment to Sinestro I really need yet in order to fully appreciate this, but it's not a bad one by any means. So I'm going to give it a 7. I think it's just crossing that good barrier, and I would say see how this pans out, but this is an alternate timeline, so we'll see what happens back in the normal timeline, I guess. Aquaman and the Others, Future's End #1, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Chen. So this picks up after the Aquaman Future's End issue, in which Atlanteans, led by Mera, were so pissed off after the war, they turned on Aquaman and brought back the dead King Atlan. Because, yeah. Also, they're trying to set up an outpost on land in order to get surface people to help rebuild Atlantis following the war. So we pick up 5 years from now. We meet up with Prisoner of War and Aaron, the grandson of Operative. And they're just talking a little bit, saying it's been crazy after the war, all this stuff. Prisoner of War reveals he's got 7 dozen more dog tags on him. And Aaron's like, yeah, well, I'm just happy you're here to help build a surface Atlantis, and hopefully it won't be too hard. And then immediately Dead King Atlan comes up being like, oh, you land dwellers, get off my lawn. So he launches an attack along with a bunch of Atlanteans. Aaron and Prisoner try to fight against it a little bit, but like ultimately it is still a hard fight. That's where Vostok comes in with his jetpack and his golden mask, and Atlan's just like, hey, you're wearing my mask, and he's like, yep, and I'm gonna keep it too. So they start fighting off all the Atlanteans. Vostok starts firing actual shots, and Aaron points out, like, whoa, 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 we're trying to build peace between Surface and Atlanteans. Do not kill them. And at that point, Atlan's like, well, killing's the only solution. He throws his trident at Vostok, knocking off his helmet. At that point, Yawara pops in via teleportation, says, hey, everybody, this isn't going to work. We need to get out of here now and regroup. So everyone goes through the portal, and Vostok has to leave his helmet behind. So Atlan picks it up and just being like, man, it's been too long since I've had this, and how appropriate. I'm going to use the same weapons I used the first time to sink an entire continent. So we cut back to Atlantis, where Aquaman's being held prisoner, and Volko's there basically like, I'm sorry, you have to understand, it's the only way. The people of Atlantis feel betrayed. And Aquaman's like, yeah, that's rich coming from you, Volko, you friggin' dick. And that's when Mera comes in being like, hey, no, he's right. You have not had the Atlanteans' best interests at heart. You brought us into this war when we could have stayed out of it. And then Aquaman's like, oh, for God's sakes, Mera, not you two. Darkseid would not have left the oceans alone. Are you really that dense? Are we really not able to like reach a compromise on anything anymore? And there's a moment of like shared sadness between them because obviously their romance has fallen apart. And Aquaman's like, look, I'm sorry, during the war, everything went wrong. And Mera's just like, dude, you're with her now. Let's not just pretend this isn't like everything that's going on between us. But like this, what I'm doing is about justice and survival. So don't even sweat it. So back over at Atlantis Island, the surface outpost they're trying to build, a bunch of Atlanteans start attacking it, like a whole little mini armada. The only ones there are Operative and Sky, but Yawara and crew teleport in and just being like, all right, well, we barely made it out of that. And Vostok's upset because he's like, I could have killed the dead king. And they point out like, bro, he was already dead. How do you kill the dead king? It doesn't work like that. So they see the armadas attacking and they're like, all right, we don't have Aquaman. We don't know if he's going to show up. Assume the worst. Let's get down there. So they start joining in on the fight. Operative, who of course has a gun, is only taking non-lethal shots because he knows the mission here is unification. Like, can't do anything against that. And he literally puts up his hands as the Atlantean approaches. He's like, let's talk it out, man. I don't want to do this. And as the Atlantean's about to like stab him, the rest of the group shows up, and Vostok once again starts taking shots. And Operative's like, bro, you're making this worse. So Vostok literally just does not give a crap the entire time. He keeps killing people indiscriminately. Aaron and the rest of the group, they all start like tackling down, doing everything they need to do. At one point, we see Prisoner of War slaps his manacles together and makes a shockwave, and it takes out pretty much the rest of the Atlanteans. But in all the chaos, Operative has been stabbed through the chest by a trident, and he ain't looking so hot. Aquaman, meanwhile, is like, these freaking idiots put me in an underwater prison cell and left me alone. I'm just going to summon a whale to break me out. And so he does it. And he just like immediately swims up to the surface. Meanwhile, Aaron's talking to his grandfather, and grandfather's like, hey man, I'm dying. You got to take my little piece of Atlantean gold. And he's like, I don't want any part of that lifestyle, grandfather. And he's like, nah, man, this is like the key to your soul. It's the key to happiness. Take it. And then he dies. And Aaron's super upset by it. But at that point is the exact moment where Atlan shows up once more and he'll be like, excuse me, if you don't want that key, I will gladly take it off your hands. And Aaron is just like broken. He's just like, oh God, my grandfather. I thought that, this was all just fun, happy-go-lucky adventuring, but then the war came and I learned what true hell really was. And we see the others are fighting against the Atlanteans and King Atlan and all that. We go up to Atlan goes up to Prisoner of War and is ready to cut off his arms in order to get the manacles. But Aquaman comes in last second and swipes his trident away. We see that the helmet falls off of him and rolls over towards Aaron, and he's like, I was left to escape this, grandfather. I didn't want to leave. Mera is attacking Yawara. Yawara's attacking Mera. What's-her-face the one who can do future sight now, the newer one, jumps in the middle and says, "Hey, everybody chill. We got some crazy ass Destiny stuff going on right now." And as Atlan knocks Aquaman away, he's about to plunge his trident into the ground and sink the continent, or at least the island, once more. And we see Aaron being like, "I know what I must do." He picks up the key. He gets handed the future sight thing from the one woman, the manacles from Prisoner of War, the globe of teleportation from Yawara, and the helmet and shield that were just kind of left hanging around. So he now has all of the fancy gold bits, and he uses that to stop Atlan from plunging his trident in the ground, and he uses his own trident to cut off Atlan's head. And he's like, "All right, anybody got a problem with what I just did there?" And Aquaman steps up and he's like, "Mara, you seriously brought back a terroristic mass murderer to try to fix your problems. Did you really think that was going to work? Clearly that was not the answer. Give me just like 6 months of honestly working with me, and I guarantee you things will get better, okay? They are not going to be able to ignore us." And we have all of the outsiders, or not outsiders, all the others saying like, "Oh, my people," says Sky, "know exactly like all of this trouble of being ignored and whatnot, blah, blah, blah." The biggest point out of this, though, is that the others are gone. They are no longer a group. They are there, but they are not doing a thing. Instead, they have now coalesced their powers into Aaron, who has become the other, because he represents the melding of the surface world of being a human, and wearing all the Atlantean stuff makes him also part Atlantean. So he is the bridge between these two cultures. He is the other. Okay, sure, whatever. It's not like the worst thing by any means, but like, I don't know. It felt like it was building up to something bigger than it was, and then it just ended up being like, and then Aaron got Voltroned, and now he is the big guy in charge. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna give it like, I gotta give it like a 6. It just didn't feel like it was building up to a bigger thing than it actually was, and then in the end it's just like they literally just did might makes right. Like, "Oh yeah, we killed your king, now you gotta listen to us," instead of actually making any like further points to their cause. So yeah, it's I'll give it a 6. Okay. The Flash Future's End #1, written by Van Jensen and Robert Venditti, art by Brett Booth. This is the only Future's End tie-in that is directly linked to the plot of the actual book it comes from. So this takes place immediately after Flash number 34, I believe. So we pick up 5 years in the future. We're in Pakistan. There's been a rock slide and a bus is trapped under rubble. Nobody is there. Nobody can help them. These people are going to die. And of course, Flash runs in being like, "Hey, I'll dig them out at super speed." So he does so. He gets all the people out. They all start, praising him, being like, "Oh, Flash, thank you so much. You saved us." And so he calls back over to Central City, checks the news to see if there's anything he missed. And immediately the news is like, Reverse Flash is out, and he's already torn like several holes through many buildings. And Flash is like, "Oh God, no, please. Hey, computer, run an analysis. I got to run this far back to Central City. How long will it take me to get there?" And it says, "At your top speed, 4 minutes, 13 seconds. And he's like, "I just saved 53 lives on that bus. How many people are going to die in Central City because I am on the other side of the world?" So we cut over to Central City, and over in the Flash book, we've gotten a future Flash, who I'm going to call Blue Flash, who's been traveling back from 15 years in the future and making pit stops along the way to stop bad things from happening until he finally reaches his end goal, which is present day. He stopped here 5 years in the future to stop Reverse Flash, and he already has him by the throat. And Reverse Flash is just like, "Hey man, cool new look. What's going on? Why are you so strong?" And he's like, "Oh, I came from the future. I'm here to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your already screwed up life. Because of you doing, your breakout and all that, Iris and Wally's going to die, and Iris is going into a wheelchair. And it's all because they were coming out to try to talk you down because Flash wasn't present. And in trying to drive out through your mayhem that you were causing in the city, the car ends up like flipping over, and they just end up, one dies and the other is paralyzed. And that was all because of you. And so we see the car is doing that exact thing at this exact moment, and Flash is just forcing Daniel to watch, and he's like, see, there it is right there. And Daniel's like, stop, let me go, I can free him, I can help them out. And Flash is like, no, you can't, but I can. And he snaps Reverse Flash's neck, then runs over to the car, gets them both out in time just before it crashes. And they're like, oh, hey, Flash, you did it. What even happened there? And Flash is just like, Wally, oh my God, it's been so long, I never thought I'd see you again. It was Daniel, he caused your crash, but don't worry, I stopped him. And they look over at the dead body of Iris's brother and Wally's uncle, and they're just like, oh my God, did you kill him? And he's like, yeah, I did, but like, it was for the greater good. And Iris gets in between Wally and Flash and just like, no, you get away here, man. I don't know what the hell you are. And Blue Flash is like, hold up, we don't have a lot of time before I show up. And then right then, normal Flash comes in, and he sees Blue Flash, and he's just like, well, that's definitely not a real Flash, so that's got to be Reverse Flash. What's up with the new outfit, Daniel? And so he runs in, he tries throwing punches, and Blue Flash is like, hey, I already killed Reverse Flash. Don't worry about it. He's gone. And Flash is like, okay, so who the hell are you? And Blue Flash takes off his cowl and shows that he's Barry from the future. And Barry of the present is like, I'm sorry, I'm currently having a mental breakdown. What in the hell is going on here? And he explains the whole thing I explained at the beginning. 15 years in the future, Megan jumps back through time. He's doing this whole thing. And Wally and Iris are like, Barry, why didn't you tell us you were Flash? What the hell is this? And older Barry's like, I don't have time to explain. Look, here's the thing. The Speed Force is broken, man. Current Flash, you understand that. Look, we are losing time, and that's because people like Daniel and people like Grodd are doing time travel. Time travel breaks the Speed Force, and now I'm only doing it now so I can time travel back to a point where the wound in the Speed Force is healable. I am still on my way there, but I needed to make these pit stops along the way just in case I didn't work it out, because then at least the world would be a little bit better, okay? That's my plan. But, you know, and then Flash is just like, well, there has to be a way to fix it without doing all this. And he's like, yeah, it's exactly what I'm doing. I'm literally going back and I'm going to stop this before any of this happens. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to get through you. And he punches Current Flash in the face, which causes this huge Speed Force explosion. And Blue Flash is like, you see how unstable that is? That's from a single punch. Can you imagine what's going to happen if, like, I don't go back and fix it? So he continues to just start beating the crap out of Current Barry. Current Barry's just like, okay, well, if you're going to be like that. And he starts unloading punches as well. And he like grabs hold of the Flash symbol on his chest. And Blue Flash is like, what the hell are you doing? And he's like, I don't know. I think it's like some kind of feedback. The fact that we're both the same Flash, the Speed Force doesn't like the fact that we're coming in contact, but I'm going to keep on forcing it and seeing what happens. So they keep on doing like a power struggle in the middle. Wally comes running in. He's like, I'll help you, Barry. And in the Speed Force explosion, he gets zapped by some lightning. And out of the rubble of the explosion, Blue Flash is gone. Current Flash is unconscious on the ground, heavily burned, and not okay. And he reaches out to Wally, and Wally gets up. He's a little bit bruised, but he's all right. He's like, I'm good. And he looks over and he sees Barry in the crater. He's like, oh, we got to get Barry to a hospital. And he goes to run towards him, but he runs at super speed. He now has the Speed Force in him. And Barry's like, hey, man, that's super cool. Look, you got the Speed Force, and I am not going to make it out of this. So I need you to figure out where that absolute nutcase Blue Flash was going to make his way to, and I need you to stop him. Don't turn crazy like that. Please don't be a Reverse Flash. I need you to be just a normal good Flash, okay? Go there, train, fix it. Got it? And Barry dies. And Wally's like, oh, I have no idea where he went to, but I will find that twisted version who killed you, and I will make him pay for what he did. So then we cut to present day, 5 years prior to all that, and Blue Flash just appears in a alleyway. A truck nearly runs him over, and he zooms out of the way, and he's like, okay, computer, when am I? And the computer's like, oh, you're at the current day DC continuity time. And he's like, what? I don't even know. All right, whatever. That was my end goal anyway. Time to continue with the series. And it says, to be continued, with a image of what I'm assuming is future Wally running back to take down Blue Flash. All right. I mean, I appreciate the fact that they tied it into continuity. There was only one book that was going to be able to do it, and this was it. I appreciate the forethought to make that work. In terms of the issue itself, it is fairly consequential. I mean, we get a Kid Flash out of it to some extent. Obviously, this is a future version and it is not going to be sticking around, but it's a thing. No, I mean, it's a fine enough issue. I think my biggest critique with it comes down to the fact of it's Brett Booth art, and it kind of just is one long extended fight scene, because they're assuming you've been reading Flash, and they couldn't get too complicated in this specific one to explain all of the ins and outs of what he did, because it also has to function as a one-shot. So overall, it's a little bit lacking, but it's still a decent enough issue. I'll give it a 7. I think it's easily earned that at the very least. I could make the argument for 7.5, but I won't. So 7 for this. Star-Spangled War Stories featuring G.I. Zombie, Futures End, #1, Jesus Christ, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Scott Hampton. So this is set somewhere in the future. It doesn't actually say 5 years later, so it might be anywhere in there. But we see a bunch of people are looting a building, and then all of a sudden they are being attacked by zombies. And we see the narration saying like, oh, this is all my fault. The thousands of people are being infected with the black ice virus. And we see, what's her name? Carmen from the series has been infected by it, but she's been contained. She's in a padded room, and G.I. Zombie, along with some random scientists, are running some tests on her. And the scientist's name is Dr. Aldridge. And the doctor's like, we are trying to make an antidote. It could be ready in an hour. And G.I. Zombie's like, we don't have an hour. It's the end of the world out there. We have a very limited time to be able to make this work. And Aldridge is like, she might have irreversible brain damage, man. We just don't know if this is going to work. And Zombie's like, I know her better than anyone. She'd want to do this to save the world. Run the test now. So he starts running the test. Then all of a sudden, a guy named Ziegler comes in saying, oh, Mr. G.I. Zombie, sir, we got trouble up top. So they come out, and we see they are on the middle of this battleship in the middle of the ocean, and a bunch of zombie paratroopers are landing on board. And he's like, all right, that's a problem. Do what you can to keep them off this ship. So they start fighting. G.I. Zombie's like throwing grenades and stuff like that, but ultimately it's too little. It's not going to work out. And he's like, oh, there's only one way I'm going to be able to keep everyone here safe. And so he leaps into the middle of this giant zombie horde and just starts going ham. And he says, oh, I can't let the monster take over completely. I can't risk turning on my own men. But we see this giant figure that seems to be made of the pieces of all of the other bodies bursts out, and it just starts punching bodies into smithereens. And the soldiers watching on are like, is that our sergeant? What the hell is going on here, man? So he crawls over and says, everyone secure the deck, clear the stragglers. And they look up and they see a helicopter in the sky. And on the helicopter is, I forget his name, it's like Gravedigger or something like that. He was a guy who was working with G.I. Zombie before. And he's like, oh, lock on target, fire at will. And he fires a missile at G.I. Zombie. It goes right through his body and blows up the back half of the ship. And we see that the delivery system has been compromised. There's no way they can disperse the antidote anymore. So the helicopter's flying away, and it's like, oh, sir, would you like to come back and shoot him again? And Gravedigger's like, nah, let the zombies do their work. I want to see what happens when they hit Gotham. So we see Aldridge applies the vaccine, and Carmen starts reacting to it, but the reaction is poor, and it seems that she is dying. Meanwhile, G.I. Zombie is putting himself back together into his human form. He goes into a soldier's bit like, hey, get me a uniform. He goes back down to check on Carmen. One of the soldiers is like, sir, the president's freaking out. What should we tell him? And just like, I don't know. We may have lost all this. We need to see how it goes with Carmen. And he gets into the room, and Aldridge is like, not well, man. She's dead. Not undead, dead. And We don't have anything else we can do. And G.I. Zombie like grabs him by the throat, being like, what, you want us to give up? Is that what you want, Dr. Aldridge? He's like, no, I just have no idea what I'm supposed to do here. What more should we do? I mean, Carmen is, and then they look over at Carmen. She's just standing up. She's totally fine. And she's like, hey, it really hurts being undead. I don't know how you do it, man. And G.I. Zombie's like, oh my God, thank God. All right, everyone, we've got an antidote, but we have no way to disperse it anymore. And the infection is heading out to Gotham. What are we going to do? And they all start throwing out this idea of like, oh, we've got combat aircraft. We got this. We've got array explosions. Do you think we can contact the JLA? And Carmen speaks up being like, hey, where are we at? Like, where are we close to? And he's like, oh, we're just north of Gotham. Why? And be like, there's a lot of farmland nearby. You might be able to get some crop dusters. And he's like, perfect. Let's do it. So they take a helicopter out to this random ass farm who's got a bunch of crop dusting planes. And G.I. Zombie walks up being like, hello, sir. My name is Jared Cabe. We need to borrow your planes. Your country needs you. So we see the Gotham outskirts, 25 miles. People are running from a zombie horde across a bridge. We see a family consisting of 2 young boys and a father. They're like, oh my God, it got our mom. What are we supposed to do? We can't outrun them. And then all of a sudden the plane comes in and starts dropping the antidote. And the family continues to run, but they see that the zombies stop, and they all start slowly getting cured back. And he's just like, oh, thank God. So they've taken a little bit of the zombie cure here, and the rest of them are ready to go. They're all making their way to Gotham when all of a sudden the helicopter with Gravedigger shows back up and follows the biplane that G.I. Zombie's in. And he's like, oh, hold on. We've got ourselves a hostile up here, but I'm going to take care of them right now. So they start shooting a G.I. Zombie ship. He jumps off the biplane onto the helicopter through the windshield and starts beating the crap out of Gravedigger and his co-pilot. And he's like, Gravedigger, why'd you do it? You betrayed this country. And he's like, oh, you've been alive for how many centuries and you're still this blind? This was all about like the politics and all this stuff. They wanted another version of you. That's the whole reason we were making the zombie thing. And G.I. Zombie pulls him out of the helicopter. They start plummeting down to the ground. And he's like, oh, it doesn't matter. You're going to be dead in a few seconds. And he's like, oh, don't you get it? I'm already dead. And it turns out Gravedigger is also a zombie like G.I. Zombie. So they both land onto cars and then just get up and continue fighting. And Gravedigger's like, this is pointless. Neither one of us can die. And G.I. Zombie's like, oh, I'm not trying to kill you. I just don't want to listen to you anymore. And he rips Gravedigger's head off of his body and puts it into a bag so he's unable to pull it back and reform himself. And he's like, hey, Command, this is G.I. Zombie. We've dropped the anti-zombie solution onto Gotham. It should be fine. We just got to clean up a few stragglers. And don't worry, I've caught who's behind it. And I'm going to make sure he gets reassembled so he can stand trial. And our last little epilogue is either Gotham or Metropolis. We see Carmen comes back to sit down with G.I. Zombie. They have a nice dinner together. And Carmen makes it clear of like, hey, I died. That's as good of a sign for me that I need to retire as anything else. So I'm getting out of the game. And he's like, oh, well, you don't think I can, change your mind? And she's like, no, this has been a lot for me. And he's like, fair enough. Well, I'll miss fighting for our country together, but let's get drunk tonight and then we can say goodbye. So it's a nice little Finn moment for them, which is weird considering we're only like 2 issues into their series and it doesn't feel like they've really earned that Finn moment, but whatever. Yeah, no, it's a fine enough issue. It feels like an inch. I think I would have been more interested if this were actually like the first issue, or if this were like an interspersed flash forward on the main book of just this idea of we're going to build up to this point. This would make it so much more interesting to me of like, oh, look at all this like tension and like how these relationships are going to develop. Instead, we get something that frankly we're never going to see any resolution to and probably is never going to be set up again. So it's okay for what it is, but it would have worked better, I think, if it were part of like the core series to some extent. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 6.5. I think it's deserved that at the very least. I probably would give it higher if I had more interest in these characters, but considering the book is just starting out as this issue came out, it just didn't have time to make that work. Justice League Dark Future's End #1, written by J.M. DeMatteis and Len Wein, art by Andre Guinaldo. So we are in the House of Mystery, which we're in a room of who we find out very quickly is Zatanna, and she's like, I hate this place. I hate it so much. Everything here sucks, and I've made some horrible choices that got us here, but ultimately, like, this is just the worst. And we see that the House of Mystery is stuck in a in-between dimension called the Nameless, and Zatanna has no idea how to get it out of there. And we see that there's like a bunch of dead bodies outside. There's like some weird sculpture looking pieces of like a hand and stuff, but ultimately they are in the nowhere place. So Zatanna's like, oh, I've been trying so hard to get us home, but like, it's no matter what spell it is, I can't figure it out. And the House of Mystery is like convening with Zatanna, and she's like, I know you want to be out of here, and I'm doing everything I can. And into Zatanna's room walks Etrigan. Just normal, not Jason Blood, Etrigan, and he's saying like, hey, Zatanna, and he's rhyming this whole time. I will not bother. He's coming in and he's like, hey, I hear you talking to the house. You okay? And she's like, yeah, I mean, no, obviously, but I'm as well as I can be. And it turns out these two are seeing each other. So they share a kiss, and Etrigan's like, okay, look, I wish I could help you more than I can, but ultimately, I'm just kind of like a demon. You're this super powerful sorcerer with all this crazy-ass magic. Is there anything I could do for you? Like, should I go and tell the others, like, what needs to be done? And Zatanna's like, no. You're here with me tonight. And they get in bed, and Zatanna's like, we do the only possible thing that could bring us joy in this joyless place. So then we cut to one of the other members here is Cassandra Kraft, who is blind and in a wheelchair. But she has future sight, and she's looking into the future, and no matter how she looks, it's always just black. There's just nothing there. It's just pure darkness. In through the windows comes Nightmare Nurse and Black Orchid, both wearing a pair of makeshift wings, and they're like, well, we flew out a bunch of distance in a given direction. We're thinking it was a different direction than yesterday, but we didn't find anything. And Cassandra Kraft's like, I knew you wouldn't. And Black Orchid's like, so then why the hell did we bother going out there if you knew we wouldn't find anything? And Cassandra says, I sense something out there. I don't know what it is, but we're going to be meeting it real soon. And Orchid's like, I don't like this. I don't like any bit of this. This is all stupid. You're stupid, and this house is stupid. And Etrigan comes in being like, hey, don't call the house stupid. And Black Orchid's like, the house is stupid. I don't know what you want. This sucks. She was saved by the house, and that's the only reason she's not dead. But like, where's Zatanna? Where's that at? And Nightmare Nurse is getting on as well. She's just like, yeah, why are we getting our orders through you second-rate demon? And Etrigan bats her away through a wall, just being like, oh, enough. Zatanna doesn't want to be seen, and she's the only reason you're even alive. And Nightmare Nurse is like, yeah, alive in this hellscape. So she transformed into her beast form, starts attacking Etrigan. Etrigan sets her on fire. She just wills it away. And Black Orchid's like, Nightmare Nurse, don't even worry about it. It's not worth it right now. All right, look, we have each other, and together, me and you will survive. And then Cassandra Kraft looks out the window being like, hey, that dude's here. The dude I was talking about, he's here now. And we look out the window, and we see this dude dressed in, like, early 1900s garb, and he's just floating throughout the nameless space. So they pull him into the House of Mystery. Nightmare Nurse is trying to get a beat on him. He is alive, but he has been absorbing all this dark magic for like ages, so it's a bit weird. It's like his soul's almost decimated, and it's hard to see what's going on. And that's when Zatanna shows up being like, yo, let me at him. And Nightmare Nurse is like, are you sure? This is a very delicate thing. Is anything going wrong? And like, you could kill him. And Zatanna's like, did I stutter? And she's like, no, sorry, here you go. So she casts some magic. He manages to start giving his backstory. His name is Eric Maitland Augustine. He was part of a crew called the Order of the Golden Age, where they were going to do magic to like send themselves to a different dimension, and it'll be a paradise dimension, and it's everything they'll ever want. So they do it. They actually do it successfully, and they get to a paradise dimension, and everything's super happy and cool and awesome. But then other people in the group are like, what if we keep going? So they kept going, and eventually they ended up in the Nameless area, and all of them except for Eric died just over time. It's just like he went into a coma, but the rest of them just died eventually. So they're all like, the rest of the group is looking at him and just being like, this is super suspicious. This random ass dude got stuck here and he's still alive. I don't like it one bit. And they all turn to look at Zatanna because she's ultimately the one that gets the choice. And she looks into his brain a little bit and just be like, all right, I believe him. Let's trust him. So they get him a map. They point out like, okay, do you know where like your portal went through from? And just like, oh yeah, it's there. So he's like, yes, of course. And thank you so much, Zatanna, for trusting me. It means the world to me. And, like, might I just say that you've saved my very soul. I owe it all to you. And Etrigan pops him and be like, hey, man, how about you leave? And he's like, yeah, totally, bye. And Zatanna's like, why aren't you rhyming anymore? He's like, I don't wanna. Hey, I don't trust this dude. I don't think we should be listening to him, okay? And she's just like, well, I do, and this is going to be our only way out of here. I looked over his psyche, I didn't find any lies, so we're going to go with it. And Etrigan's like, cool, glad to know my opinion means so much to you. So at that point, Cassandra Kraft says, hey, we're getting to the portal space. It's right outside. It's the head of a giant dead god. His name is Non. Or, sorry, they don't know his name. We get to his name. But it's inside of, like, his mouth or whatever. And there's also a giant magical vortex right behind him. So they get closer to the thing, and everyone's like, this seems wrong. This seems like absolute death. That ain't right. So Zatanna's like, okay, fair enough. I've got an idea, and also a bit of a death wish. She takes Eric and blasts him through the window of the House of Mysteries. They're now just floating out in the empty, nameless space. And he's like, what are you doing? We're all gonna, like, we can't do it. And he's like, okay, but, like, I'm going to go before my team and make sure it's safe. So is it safe or not? And Eric gets all grim looking. He's like, of course it's not safe. You stupid idiot. It's too late for all of you now. And she's like, no, I can't believe I trusted you. And he's like, yeah, that really wasn't smart. I don't know why you think that would work. So both her and the house start making their way into the portal of this dead god thing. And Zatanna, before it's able to get inside, uses her magic to teleport it to some other place in the Nameless. So it's gone, and it's just the two of them now floating in this dead space. And she's like, all right, Eric, now I'm going to lay into you. But Eric's dead. Eric's now just a husk. And she's like, what? What the hell's going on here? And then all of a sudden, the head of the giant nameless god introduces itself, being like, yeah, I was just puppeting that guy. He was a dead body long, long ago, and I just, like, reinstated his memories, and he thought they were true, which is why your magic spells didn't, like, detect anything. But ultimately, it was me conjuring it, because every time that a sorcerer ends up in this realm, I swallow their magical entity so that I might bring myself out of it once I have enough built up. So, that's what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to eat you. And she's like, all right, whatever. I saved my friends, and I'm fine with dying. Anything to get out of this hellhole. And then all of a sudden, Eric's body wakes back up again. It's like, no, Zatanna, now is not your time. And then using a portal through Eric, the Justice League Dark come in, start blasting magic at the head of Non, and it just explodes. And all the magical energy inside of it causes this huge ripple, like shockwave. And we see this spirit form come out saying, like, oh, this moment may be yours, but you will hear from me again. And as it fades away. And they go back to the House of Mystery somehow, and the Zatanna's like, all right, explain it to me one more time. And it's like, well, we figured you were being stupid, so we ran our own little psychic tests on him, and we noticed a little bit that you didn't because you were absolutely way too in deep in this. So we just set a little portal spell thing that we could transmit to in the event that something went wrong. And Zatanna's like, no, I understood all that. Clearly I know all that. What I don't understand is, why did you come back for me? I've been a total bitch. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, you saved us all countless times. Like, we've done so much together. Of course we owe you for that. And she's like, oh, well, I'm grateful. And then Cassandra's like, hey, Eric, he actually managed to come back to life, like, legitimately here. What should we do with him? And they all look at Eric, and Eric's like, oh, thank you so much. I don't know what happened, but, like, I hope you can accept me as one as yours. And Zatanna's like, yeah, no. Etrigan, take care of this. And Etrigan just cuts his head off. And Zatanna makes the point of being like, he was controlled by Non before. We couldn't risk that being a thing that happens again. So yeah, we just kind of gave him the boot from the house. That's a risk we couldn't take. So Zatanna looks around the group being like, anybody got a problem with what I did? And they're like, no. And it's like, cool, great. Get back to work. We're going to get ourselves back home. So Zatanna continues to be a hard ass, but she at least knows that her friends care about her, I guess. All right. It's literally just, hey, why are there more sorcerers running around in Future's End? And the answer is, they're all in this empty, nameless space where they'll never come back from. Cool. Why not? My only critique art style wise, the rest of it's pretty good, but the cover of the book, specifically like the alternate cover, makes Zatanna look absolutely like her face is scarred and her hair is just like patchwork together. That is not at all what she looks like in the book. In the book, she still has her long hair and like maybe one scar, depending on the angle. So maybe talk to your cover artist to make sure they know what's going on. But beyond that, it's okay. It's an all right little one shot. It's not going to impact anything at all. I'd say it's like a 6.5. I wouldn't put it in good territory, but it's certainly not below the halfway point by any means. Booster Gold Future's End #1, written by Dan Jurgens, art by a bunch of different people. I will just quickly say here, Moritat, Dan Jurgens, Norm Rapman, Will Conrad, Steve Lytle, Stephen Tompkin, Mark Irwin, Rob Brenz, Scott Hanna, Brett Booth, and Norm Rapman again. All right, so this does not have a series to connect with. It's just its own thing. However, you do need to know that Justice League International Annual ended with Booster Gold just disappearing from the timeline. Also, post-Flashpoint and pre-Flashpoint are different things. Okay? All right. We open up in Victorian ages Gotham, and there's just like two dudes who are walking down the street being like, "Oi, it's a bad time around here. There's a lot of bad stuff going on, and we're one of them." And they find a man who's like struggling in a pile of garbage, and it's like, "Oi, look, it's a drunkard. Let's search his pockets for anything good. Where are his pockets?" And then boosting out of the trash is Booster Gold. But he's not wearing the outfit that we last saw him in. He's wearing like armor and an Argus logo on his chest. And he's like, where the hell am I? Last thing I remember, I'm in Justice League HQ, and now I'm late 1800s? I don't know what's happening here. And so the two guys that he like batted away start coming at him with like canes and knives and stuff like that. And he's like, all right, well, it's definitely Gotham. I got that at least. And as he's trying to figure out what's going on, he's like, I was on a mission. I got to figure out how I'm supposed to get back here. And he calls for Skeets, but there's no contact there. A bunch of other people start coming up to attack him. And he's like, all right, whatever. My mission, it's coming back to me now. I've got to get out of here. And as he flies away, in comes Batman, who is like Gotham by Gaslight Batman. He's not the actual one. So Booster flies up into the air. But then all of a sudden, as he's trying to access the time stream, he hits something, like a wall. And he's like, what the hell was that? Cut to some other place. We've got some very clearly Brainiac robots, because they've got the little 3 dots on them. Maybe Brother Eye. They've got someone inside of a tube, and they're interrogating him. And he's like, tell us what we want to know. And he's like, all right. 2 all beef patties, special sauce. And it's like, all right, enough of this. Prepare him. You're going to tell us what we need to know. And he's like, oh, it's the last line of defense, and I'm not going to talk. And he gets a tube put in the back of his head, and we see that it is a version of Booster Gold getting attacked here. So then we cut to Justice League International Annual #1. And it's OMAC versus the JLI, and the new Booster, Armored Booster, is like hovering there, and he's incorporeal. He's able to see what's happening, but he's not able to interact. And he's like, okay, I'm being shoved through time at random intervals. I'm not sure what's going on, but regardless, maybe I can freeze the time stream and I can like talk to the other Booster going on. So he does. He freezes the time stream, and the other Booster stands up, normal Booster, I'll call him, and he's like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, I've frozen time. He's like, okay, who the hell are you? He's like, I'm you? Like, who do you think I am? And then Armored Booster sees on the screen Superman and Wonder Woman kissing, the same thing that happened in the book. And he's like, wait a minute, that's not right. This can't be my universe. This didn't happen, but like, I've seen this before. I've lived this before. Something's going on here. And then he starts fading away through time, and then so does normal Booster, the same way that it happened before. He disappears. So Armored Booster ends up in the 31st century, the Legion of Superheroes timeline, and he's like, what the heck? What's going on? Like, they're speaking Interlac, and then all of a sudden he's attacked by Validus and Tharok. And they're just like, well, I'm not sure what's going on, but this dude has a Legion flight ring, and now that our powers just started working again, let's get out of here. Let's attack him and get out of here. So he gets attacked by Validus, and he's just like, what the heck is going on? I feel the time wave about to hit me again. I don't know what's happening here, but like, I have to stay. I have to help fight. But then the whole Legion of Superheroes comes in, and they're ready to start fighting as well. So we cut again, and this time he is somewhere else, but he doesn't know where. He's in Hub City, and he's like, maybe this is unintentional. Maybe I'm just being bounced around randomly. I'm not sure. And then he sees Captain Atom versus some other dude, not Dr. Spectro, and he's like, wait a minute, this is Earth 4. This is the Charlton comics. Everyone keeps on talking about the fact that their powers just came back. What is happening? So Booster goes up to Captain Atom. He's like, hey, we discovered the multiverse. I know you're from a different Earth. And he's like, Dr. Spectro, you're doing another thing, aren't you? And Captain Atom just blasts Booster Gold across the city. And he's just like, all right, this is getting old. I'm not wanting to do with this anymore. And as he's coming back for Captain Atom, all of a sudden he just fades out again. He gets hit with another time wave. So now he ends up in a post-dystopian Earth. Everything's destroyed. And in comes two giant talking tigers, including Prince Tufton. And Booster's like, oh, I've read about this in Rip Hunter's diaries. Like, I know this is the post-disaster stuff of, like, Commandi and all that stuff. I would never thought I would have seen it in person. And so the tigers start attacking him, and he just starts, like, flipping him around. He's just, easily taking care of him. And he's just like, all right, I got to deal with whatever's pushing me through the time screen. So he ends up hitting one of the tigers down and takes off into the sky. And as he flies up, Commandi comes down from a hot air balloon and starts dealing with the tigers himself. And he's like, all right, here we go again. So we cut back to the other Booster. First Booster. He was the one who was inside of that tank being interrogated, and we keep on hearing the speech bubble saying, like, tell me what we want, tell me what needs, and this all end for you. And Booster's like, go to hell. And the voice is like, oh, I've been there once, but like, I need something to bend you to my will. What's it going to be? And Booster is like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to tell you. So once again, we go back to Armored Booster. He ends up in Metropolis. He thinks he's back home one more time. And as he arrives, he meets with his sister, Michelle, who is also flying around. And Michelle's like, hey, you look older and your costume's different. What's going on? And he's like, it's a long story. I'm just happy to be home. Like, what's going on here? And she's like, I don't know. How did you even get in here when Metropolis has been cut off from the rest of the world? And Booster's like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, nobody can get in or out, and all of our powers were gone until just a minute ago, and now everything's working. We don't know who or why or what's going on. And then all of a sudden the time wave hits again, but this time it takes both Booster and Michelle, and they both end up inside of this room where the other Booster is. And other Booster's like, wait a minute, you're the Booster that I ran into before I showed up here, and you're my sister. What the hell's going on here? And Michelle's like, what's going on? And Armored Booster's like, I think I finally get it. Here's the thing. I'm not an older version of you, Booster. I'm an older version of you. I am from a different timeline, a place, a universe that you have never known. And this is my sister from my timeline. But like, clearly you have a sister as well. It's something else is going on here. And all of a sudden the voice speaks out again saying, like, tell me what I want to know, and you're all free to leave. And Booster's like, nah, we're leaving regardless. And he goes to rip the tube out of the back of the younger Booster's head when all of a sudden he gets attacked by some of the Brainiac robots. And he's like, no, you're not getting out of here just that easy. So they get chained up and also given like tubes, attacked by the robots. And the Brainiac voice basically says, you have a monitoring platform outside of time and space. It's called Vanishing Point. Tell me where it is. Tell me how to get to it. And Booster's like, no way, man. And he's like, fine, then I'm going to kill your sister. And she starts getting zapped, starts getting killed. Armored Booster's like, no, stop. Don't hurt her. Don't do it. And he's like, just tell me where Vanishing Point is. And he's like, no. If you are powerful enough to do this, you are exactly the type of person who can't know where Vanishing Point is. And younger Booster's like, I haven't seen my sister since I left for the 25th century. Even if she's not my real sister, I can't let her die. And Armored Booster's like, shut up, man. Don't tell him where. He will ruin everything in the multiverse if you do so. And Brainiac's like, 3 seconds, 2, 1. And young Booster says, stop. I'll tell you everything. and I will take you to the vanishing point. It says, to be continued, where worlds and futures end, which I don't think I have to inform anybody, is convergence. And that is... Hoo boy. All right, so for this issue specifically, it is a confusing mess, but I love a good retcon. I love when they take a moment that wasn't fully paid off in continuity and they make it work for them. I don't know what the initial plan was. I think it was probably just to be the Booster Gold, like he came from the future, this is where paths diverged, and now it didn't work out. He just faded from the timeline, but now that things have been shaken up again, it works again. So I am down with this. That being said, it's confusing as all hell, and it's setting up for convergence, which is its own can of worms. But I think this issue was very well done. I'm giving it 7.5, just shy of the 8. I don't think it's quite in that great territory, but it is very good. And it does feel like one of those things where if you're going to read Future's End, there's like 6 stories you got to read. This is one of them. This is one of the ones where it's important to the universe functionality of moving from A to B. This is a necessary issue. So check it out, I guess, if you really, really want to. And that's it. That is all the comics that came out from DC Comics this September 24th, 2014. And with that, we have finished Future's End month officially. Woo! I know that, this does not mean anything to the audio people, but this is the omnibus that I have been reading through. And I've been staring at this on my shelf for no joke at least 4 years now. Probably more. And I thought, I am never going to get through this thing. Like, ever. And then I came up with the context of this show, and I was like, oh, well, I mean, why not? So, I'm happy to have it out of the way, at the very least. I am happy to say that I never have to open this book ever again. Might I? No, I still won't. But I could, but I won't. Anyway, with that month being over, we now look to the future. What happens after Future's End? Well, we've got about, I think it's 9 months, give or take, until DC gets its next little baby out, which is Convergence. We don't even get a full year until the next big event, so be looking forward to that when that happens. That is a 2-monther as well. Ugh. But for now, let's just focus on the immediate future. Yes, pun intended. We have next week's comics to talk about, episode 161. And we got 16 of them with 2 number 1s and a special, a one-shot that kicks off the next Green Lantern event. So, batten down the hatches, it's going to be a long one. In no particular order, we have Detective Comics, Grayson, Action Comics, Batman/Superman, Green Lantern, Aquaman and the Others, Green Arrow, Justice League 3000, Wonder Woman, and Swamp Thing. We also have the 2 weeklies of Batman Eternal and Future's End. And then as for our new number 1s, we have Gotham Academy and Lobo. And for any of you wondering, yes, this is New 52 Lobo. Yes, he is an edgelord. No, this is not the first time we're meeting him. He's been around for a while. Beyond that, the one-shot is Green Lantern New Gods Godhead number 1. That is kicking off the Godhead crossover event, whatever you want to call it, across all the Green Lantern books. It's going to be a whole big thing, and we'll be going through those as we hit them. And then Justice League is actually Justice League not 35, like all the other comics are. It is Justice League 34, because Jeff Johns cannot keep a schedule, and he's just going to constantly drift behind everybody else. So yeah, I think that's basically everything that needs to be said. There might be another event or something in there. Hell, Green Lantern might even be part of the event. I don't know. I am so fed up with Future's End month that I haven't bothered to look ahead. But yeah, that's all stuff going on. Beyond that, I don't think there's anything else I really want to share. Happy October for anybody who is in October at the time of doing this. Beyond that, I will just say my usual spiel at the end. So if you have anything that you would like to add in terms of comments for comics that came out this week, last week, anything at all, go ahead and hit me up in the comments down below the YouTube video, or you can hit us up on one of our many social media platforms such as Reddit, Patreon, or Discord. We prefer the Discord if you're poor. If you're rich, we prefer the Patreon. yeah, that's about all I really got going for me this week. Be sure to tune in next week. Thank you so much for listening in and doing all the positive interaction stuff. I am absolutely butchering this ending, but I cannot express to you how late it is and how long of a day I've had. I apologize for all that. Oh, there was something else I wanted to mention. I realize I'm now saying this at the end where I am literally wrapping everything up. So I'll also mention it tomorrow, or next week, I should say. I have accidentally been saying John Layman in all of the Batman Eternal credits for like the past month and a half, when it's actually been Kyle Higgins. At some point, they switched over the writers, and I didn't notice. So apologies to Kyle Higgins. I will correct that moving forward. Anyway, where was I? Thank you. And as always, try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.